you've been scammed.
Oh, yeah.
Like, genuinely scammed. The deal that our parents signed us up for, keep your head down, follow the instructions, be a loyal cog in the machine, and society will just take care of you forever. That is completely dead.
It is entirely dead.
Yeah, we are operating under this social contract that, frankly, it expired decades ago, and most people just haven't received the memo yet.
No, they haven't. And it's not just dead, it's actually actively dangerous.
Right?
The paradox that we're looking at today in this deep dive is that the safe path, the one that we were all literally trained from kindergarten to follow, is now unequivocally the riskiest path you can take.
Wow.
Yeah. If you want to survive and thrive in the modern economy, compliance is essentially a slow, comfortable death sentence.
A comfortable death sentence. I mean, that is a heavy way to start. But today we are diving into a really massive stack of research, anchored largely by Seth Godin's concepts on work and what he calls the linchpin. And we're mixing that with some frankly fascinating historical data on the Industrial Revolution and the psychological mechanics of fear.
Yeah, there's a lot of biology in here too, which is great.
There is. So our mission in this deep dive today is to unpack this fundamental shift in the world of work. We are moving from an economy that was built on compliant factory workers to one that exclusively rewards individuals who bring unique art, emotional labor, and just pure humanity to their roles.
Exactly.
And for anyone who is interested in business or entrepreneurship or, frankly, just keeping their head above water right now.
It's paying the rent, yeah.
Right. Understanding the shift is literally the difference between racing to the bottom as a cheap, interchangeable commodity and racing to the top as an irreplaceable leader.
I completely agree. And to even begin to understand what a linchpin is, we have to look at what it isn't.
Okay.
We have to dismantle this illusion of job security and examine the actual architecture of how work has been structured for the last, couple of centuries.
Because it didn't just happen by accident.
No. The system didn't just accidentally become this soul-crushing cubicle farm. It was engineered that way on purpose.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the concept of interchangeability. Because for over a century, the overarching goal of the entire industrial system was to achieve a high PRL.
Right, P-E-R-L.
Yeah, P-E-R-L, which stands for the percentage of easily replaced laborers.
It's such a clinical, terrifying term.
It really is. But the logic is brutally simple if you look at it from a management perspective. If a job can be written down into a manual, it can be outsourced.
Yep.
And if it can be outsourced, it can be done cheaper. And if it can be done cheaper, well, eventually it just gets automated entirely.
Exactly. Because if you are a factory owner, maximizing that PRL well metric is fantastic for your profit margins.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can easily replace any worker on the floor by Tuesday, you never have to pay them a premium. You never have to worry about them leaving. You hold all the cards.
Right.
And we actually see the origin of this historically in the sources. There was a French general named Jean-Baptiste Gribeauval.
Gribeauval.
Yeah, in the 1700s. And he introduced this concept of interchangeable parts for muskets.
Which, before that, how did it work?
Well, before him, a gunsmith crafted a whole gun from scratch. So if a piece broke in the field, you needed a master gunsmith to carve a new piece perfectly to fit that specific, unique gun.
Oh, wow. So every gun was basically a custom piece of art.
Exactly. But Gribeauval realized that if you standardize the parts, literally anyone can fix it.
Which is brilliant for logistics on a battlefield. You just swap the barrel and keep shooting.
Absolutely brilliant. And then Eli Whitney brought that concept to the United States, and eventually Henry Ford applied it to mass production with the assembly line.
Right. The Model T?
Yeah. Ford's genius was standardizing everything, so he didn't need skilled artisans anymore. He could just hire anyone off the street.
But the dark side of that innovation, the unintended consequence, is that once you have interchangeable parts, the next logical step is interchangeable workers.
Yes, the human being just becomes another standardized cog. You just slot them in and out.
And we mistakenly think this is just about manufacturing, right? Like, oh, that's just assembly lines. That's factory work. But we are living with the hangover of that exact system in white-collar work today.
Oh, heavily.
Look at the modern mechanical Turk. For those listening who might be unfamiliar, the original mechanical Turk was this 18th century fake chess-playing machine.
It's a crazy story.
It is. It looked like a brilliant automaton, like a robot wearing a turban playing chess, but it was a total scam. It actually had a human chess master hidden inside a little compartment pulling the levers.
Right, making it look like the machine was doing the work.
Exactly. And Amazon actually co-opted that name for their web service today, which is incredibly telling.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the factory mindset applied to the digital world. I mean, Amazon's Mechanical Turk allows companies to take digital tasks, break them down into these tiny microscopic micro jobs, and farm them out to an army of anonymous workers all over the globe for literal pennies.
Yeah, there's a brilliant example in the source notes about this that really makes it visceral.
The transcription.
Yeah, the transcription one. So a guy has a 40-minute audio interview he needs transcribed. Traditionally, he would hire a professional transcriptionist, pay maybe $80, and wait a few days.
Right, a skilled professional doing a custom job.
Exactly. Instead, he feeds the audio into the Mechanical Turk system, and the software automatically chops the file into tiny, fragmented pieces.
Like 30-second clips.
Yeah, just random 30-second out-of-context clips. And those pieces are transcribed by a horde of invisible people making maybe $2 an hour.
Just typing what they hear, no context, no connection.
Not at all. And then the software stitches it all back together, and he gets his full transcript in 3 hours for like $15.
It's amazing for the guy who needs the transcript. But if you are the worker,
Yeah.
if your daily job consists of predictable, manual-driven tasks, you aren't just competing with the guy in the cubicle next to you anymore. You are competing with the modern Mechanical Turk.
You're competing with a globalized race to the bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the exact same dynamic that destroyed the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, that's a great point.
You had a 250-year-old institution. They had a $100 billion budget. They employed the smartest experts in the world to write these perfect articles.
And then Jimmy Wales comes along with Wikipedia.
Jimmy Wales comes along, and he leverages a loosely coordinated group of unpaid volunteers making millions of micro contributions, and that massive institution is decimated almost overnight.
Okay, wait, I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
Isn't structure fundamentally good? I mean, it sounds like you're implying that being a reliable employer who just follows the rules and gets the job done is somehow a bad thing.
Well,
Because if I'm running a business, I want people who follow the manual. It's almost like being a generic brand of cereal at the grocery store.
okay, I like that analogy.
Right, like it's perfectly fine. It provides the exact same calories. It gets the job done. Not everything needs to be this artisanal, handcrafted, expensive experience. Sometimes you just need the generic cornflakes.
I see what you're getting at, but the problem is the market dynamics. Being reliable is a baseline. It's table stakes now,
Okay.
but it is no longer a competitive advantage for the worker. Sure, the grocery store wants generic cereal because it's cheap to stock. But do you want to be the generic cereal?
I guess not.
Because nobody is specifically seeking it out. They only buy it when it's the absolute lowest price on the shelf.
I see. So if someone comes along and offers the exact same generic cereal for a penny less?
You're obsolete
Yeah.
instantly.
Wow.
Let's look at Hector. He's a day laborer in Queens mentioned in the text.
Yeah, that story stuck with me.
It's a perfect distillation of this. He stands on a street corner with 6 other guys at 6 in the morning. They're all bundled up against the cold, waiting for a contractor to drive up in a pickup truck.
Right.
They're all physically capable. They all offer the exact same basic physical labor. So when the contractor pulls up, how does he choose?
He just picks whoever is cheapest.
Exactly. He picks 3 guys purely based on who will take the lowest hourly wage. And Hector goes home with nothing because he refused to work for less than minimum wage.
Man.
If your resume is just a list of compliant skills, if your job is just following a set of instructions, you are basically standing on a corporate street corner. You are completely fungible.
That is a brutal image, but it's so accurate. I mean, if I'm listening to this on my commute right now, I'm probably mentally auditing my day.
You should be.
Yeah. I have to look at my schedule and ask, like, if a stranger could read a manual and do 80% of my job by tomorrow morning, I am in serious danger.
You are incredibly vulnerable.
I have to start finding the friction points where my specific human judgment is the only thing that works.
And that leads to a really fascinating psychological contradiction.
What's that?
Well, if being a cog is so incredibly dangerous today, if it guarantees a race to the bottom, why do we all instinctively try so hard to fit in?
Oh,
Why is our default setting to always look around for the manual?
because it was baked into us by design.
Exactly.
We have to look at the indoctrination of the school system. And I don't mean this in a tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory kind of way. It's literally right there in the historical record.
It is the stated goal of the system.
Right. School, as we know it today, was not designed to create artists or free thinkers or innovators. It was funded and structured by early industrialists for one specific purpose: to create compliant factory workers.
It is quite literally the factory model of education.
Yeah.
Think about the physical space. You put children in neat little rows, you run the day on a bell schedule, just like a factory shift.
Right. The bell rings, you move to the next station.
Exactly. You teach them to raise their hand before speaking. You reward them for sitting perfectly still and just retaining rote information. And you punish them for talking out of turn or challenging the authority figure at the front of the room.
There's a great illustration of this in the notes. It contrasts a 2-year-old toddler named Zeke with a high school student.
Oh, I love the Zeke example.
Yeah, so Zeke is on an airplane, and he's doing what 2-year-olds do. He's standing on the seat, he's touching the air vent, he's babbling to the stranger behind him. He's just intensely curious.
Exploring everything.
Right. He is exploring his environment without any fear of looking foolish. And the premise here is that we are all born artists like Zeke. We are all born naturally curious. But then we go through 12 to 16 years of institutional training that actively, systematically drums that out of us.
And the historical evidence for this is staggering. The sources pulled direct quotes from guys like Woodrow Wilson and Andrew Carnegie.
These are the heavy hitters.
Right. These weren't secret mustache-twirling villains hiding in the shadows. They were the actual architects of the modern era, and they explicitly stated their goals in public.
Wow.
They wrote extensively about how the economy needed a very large class of minimally educated, compliant manual laborers.
Just enough to run the machines.
Literally. They engineered the public school system to give people just enough education to read the instructions on the machines, to know how to follow basic orders, but definitely not enough critical thinking skills to question the system itself.
They wanted to build a high PRL society.
Exactly. A perfectly interchangeable workforce.
Yeah.
And the most insidious part is how they actually accomplished it. The psychological mechanism of control.
Which is fear.
Yes. Schools utilize fear as a shortcut to teach compliance. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, we remember things that we learn in frightening circumstances incredibly vividly.
Right, like if you touch a hot stove once, your brain burns that memory into your neural pathways, so you literally never do it again.
Exactly. So schools essentially turn classrooms into these mild, chronic, fear-based environments.
It's the fear of getting a D- on a pop quiz.
Yep.
The fear of missing a deadline and getting a 0. The fear of standing out in the hallway and being mocked by the other kids.
The fear of the permanent record.
Yes, the permanent record. And what the sources point out is that this childhood fear smoothly morphs into adult fear. We just swap the classroom for the boardroom.
It's a seamless transition.
The fear of the teacher just becomes the fear of the boss.
And we end up measuring success in a very narrow, completely artificial way. We confuse being good at school with being equipped for real-world success.
Which are two very different things.
Completely different. What does getting an A really mean? In most traditional systems, getting an A just means you perfectly conform to the banal expectations of the teacher.
Right. You took good notes.
You used a number 2 pencil, you filled in the bubble completely,
Yeah.
and you memorized facts that honestly today are freely available on your smartphone in 3 seconds.
I love this idea in the text about the A versus the D. Their argument is that sometimes doing boundary pushing, truly innovative work, means you should proudly give yourself a D.
I think that's such a freeing concept.
It really is. Because if you are getting a D from a system that was specifically designed to create obedient cogs, it might just mean you are acting like a linchpin.
They're breaking the mold.
Exactly. You are refusing to do the rote memorization and instead doing something genuinely creative.
A well-earned D is a badge of honor in the new economy. It means you challenged the structure. You didn't ask for the map. And that's really the crux of unlearning this indoctrination.
Right.
You have to stop looking for the syllabus in your career. Most people, they get hired at a new job and they immediately ask, what are my KPIs? What's the step-by-step process? They desperately want the comfort of the manual.
Right, because if they follow the manual and the project fails, it's the manual's fault, not theirs. It's a brilliant way to hide.
It's entirely about deflecting responsibility.
So if the school system effectively churns out cogs, and the factory itself is now obsolete because of automation and globalization, we're left with a massive void.
A huge void.
What actually fills that gap? Who is surviving this shift?
This brings us to the core concept of the whole deep dive. The linchpin. Since the old blueprint is completely useless, the new blueprint centers on individuals who perform what the text calls emotional labor.
Okay, Let's define emotional labor carefully, because in popular culture right now, I feel like that term gets thrown around a lot to mean like bearing the mental load of organizing a household or simply dealing with exhausting people at work.
Yeah, the definition has drifted a bit in the zeitgeist.
Right. But in this context, it means something very specific. It means bringing humanity, making connections, navigating really complex situations, and leading when there is absolutely no map to follow.
It's the work of a human being doing something a machine cannot do.
Okay.
And to understand why this is so insanely valuable right now, you have to look at the shift in leverage. In the industrial age, leverage was capital. It was owning the actual factory.
Right. The building, the machines.
Yeah. The person who owned the multi-million-dollar steel mill had all the power, and the worker had basically none. Today, the means of production isn't a massive brick building. The means of production is a $3,000 laptop.
That is such a fundamental power shift. The worker now owns the factory.
Exactly.
Your laptop, your internet connection, your smartphone, that's literally all you need to reach a global market. The leverage is no longer physical capital. The leverage is entirely inside your head. It's your art. It's your ability to connect.
And we see this operating across every single level of employment. It's not just Silicon Valley CEOs who can be linchpins.
Right. Give me an example.
Take Darian Page, for example. She was the official receptionist at the White House under the Obama administration.
Okay.
Now, on paper, if you look at the manual, her job is incredibly functional. Check IDs, run people through the metal detector, point them to the waiting room.
Very straightforward.
A machine could theoretically do 90% of that. An iPad on a stand could check people in.
But she didn't treat it like a functional job.
Not at all.
The sources describe how she would meticulously research guests before they arrived. She knew their names, their backgrounds, why they were there.
She did her homework.
Yeah. So when someone walked through those doors, and they were often incredibly nervous because, it's the West Wing.
It's highly intimidating.
Very intimidating. She didn't just check a box on a clipboard. She created a profoundly human, welcoming connection in the few seconds it took to walk from security to her desk. She elevated a standard, compliant job into an irreplaceable interaction. She performed emotional labor.
She made them feel seen. Or look at the opposite end of the corporate ladder. Marissa Mayer, during her early days as an executive at Google.
Oh, this is a great story.
She wasn't the one writing the core search algorithm. She
Yeah.
wasn't the primary software engineer, but she was the absolute linchpin of that era.
Because of what she protected.
Yes. Her role was acting as the indispensable interface between these brilliant, highly technical engineers and the general public. She fiercely protected the user experience.
Right. She famously demanded that the Google homepage stay completely clean and simple.
Just a single search bar.
Just the search bar.
Yeah.
When everyone else, the ad execs, the marketing people, they all wanted to clutter it up with ads and news feeds and weather widgets like Yahoo had.
Because that's what the manual said you do to make money in the early 2000s.
Exactly. But she understood what the user needed emotionally. They needed simplicity and speed, even if the engineers wanted to show off their complex new features, and the execs wanted short-term ad revenue.
And that interface, that specific emotional labor of bridging those two very different worlds and holding the line, it created billions of dollars in long-term value.
You even see it in a much more mundane setting, like a restaurant. Imagine a really chaotic Friday night dinner service.
Oh, the worst.
The kitchen messes up an order, the computer system crashes, and you have an angry customer at table 4 who's been waiting 45 minutes.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. The waiter who can step into that chaos, calm the customer down, fix the balky computer system, and somehow mollify the stressed-out chef without having a complete meltdown themselves. That person is a troubleshooter.
Yes.
And you cannot put troubleshooting in a manual.
Because if you could predict the trouble, it wouldn't be trouble. You would have just engineered it out of the system in the first place.
Exactly. Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
I hear these examples and they sound inspiring. They really do. But how do I actually justify this to my CFO?
The spreadsheet problem.
Yes. If I am a mid-level manager and I start spending 2 hours a day doing emotional labor like building deeper connections across departments or taking the time to mentor a junior employee or brainstorming some wild new product idea, how do I measure that? Because we live in a world of spreadsheets, metrics, and OKRs.
We do.
If emotional labor is essentially invisible on a spreadsheet, aren't I just going to get fired for not hitting my arbitrary widget quota?
It is a very real concern. And the sources address this by requiring a mental separation between what we call the job and the work.
Okay, what's the difference?
To survive in a spreadsheet-driven culture, you have to treat your job simply as a platform. You still have to do the expected tasks.
You still have to file your TPS reports.
Right, you hit the baseline requirements so you don't get fired. But you stop pouring your soul into being the absolute best at the manual tasks. You do them efficiently, get them out of the way, and you pivot your real energy into the work.
So the job is the baseline, and the work is the art.
Precisely. The work is the interactions, the troubleshooting, the unique creativity. It's the moments where you lean into a complex problem that everyone else is backing away from because it's messy.
Because there's no manual for the messy stuff.
Exactly. And over time, bosses and markets, the good ones anyway, they recognize the work because it's the only thing that actually moves the needle forward. A cheaper worker can do your job, but they cannot do your work.
Which raises probably the biggest psychological hurdle in this entire discussion.
The resistance.
Yeah. If becoming a linchpin is the clear path to success, if doing the work is the only way to avoid becoming the mechanical Turk, why is it so incredibly hard to actually do it?
It's terrifying.
Why do we freeze up? Why do we sit in meetings and knowing we have a brilliant idea and just swallow it, choosing to stay quiet instead?
Because you are fighting millions of years of human evolution.
It's not just a personality flaw.
No, it's biology.
Yeah.
The sources point directly to our biology, specifically this intense tension between two competing forces in our brain. On one side, we have what the ancient Greeks called the daemon.
D-A-E-M-O-N.
Right. This is the mythological source of our genius, our art, our kindness, our insight.
It's that voice that gives you the really great idea when you're just standing in the shower.
Yes, the creative spark.
Oh.
But on the other side, sharing the exact same skull, is the lizard brain. Scientifically, this is the amygdala, right? It's that primitive structure near the brainstem, and its entire singular focus is survival.
It doesn't care about art.
It doesn't care about your career, your art, or your fulfillment. It only cares about keeping you alive. It is constantly hungry, scared, angry, and horny. That is all it does.
And the lizard brain creates what the text calls the resistance. This is such a powerful concept to me.
It explains so much of human behavior.
It really does. The resistance views standing out, taking risks, or offering new ideas as a literal mortal threat. To the lizard brain, raising your hand in a corporate meeting with a wild, unconventional idea is biologically equivalent to stepping out of a cave and facing a saber-toothed tiger alone.
It sounds absurd to our modern, rational minds, right? We know a bad meeting won't kill us. But biologically, the physical response is identical.
Sweaty palms, elevated heart rate, tunnel vision.
Exactly. The resistance is that voice in your head giving you a million incredibly rational-sounding excuses to stall, procrastinate, or just water down your ideas until they're boring.
Oh, the rationalizations are the worst.
It tells you, you need to research this a little more before sharing it, or now isn't a good time, or you don't want to step on the manager's toes.
It uses your own intelligence against you.
Yes. To keep you safe and hidden.
The ultimate undeniable illustration of this is the fear of public speaking.
It's the classic example.
It consistently ranks as one of humanity's greatest fears, famously ranking above the fear of death in some surveys, which, if you think about it, is insane. People would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy.
It makes no logical sense.
None. But why does it happen? Because public speaking combines social intelligence, the fear response, and perception. Historically, evolutionarily, facing a large crowd of your tribe meant you were either being judged for a crime or you were about to be exiled.
Right.
And 10,000 years ago, exile literally meant death. You couldn't survive alone in the wilderness.
So when you stand at a podium today, your lizard brain screams, sit down, hide, blend in, or you will die.
Wow.
And this is where the real paradigm shift happens in the material. Most people think feeling that fear means they're doing something wrong, like, oh, I'm scared, I shouldn't do this. But if we understand the biology, we can actually use the resistance as a compass.
A compass, meaning the fear actually points the way.
Exactly. If you feel that specific sinking fear in your gut about a project or an email or a pitch, it doesn't mean you should stop. It usually means you are on exactly the right track.
That's profound.
The lizard brain only fights back when you are doing something that truly matters, something that exposes your art and your humanity to the world. Notice that your lizard brain never freaks out when you're just doing mindless busy work.
Or filling out expense reports.
Right. or scrolling on social media.
Yeah.
It loves that stuff. It's safe. It only thrashes when you are about to do the work.
I've absolutely experienced that. You write the difficult email, the one that tells the hard truth about a failing project, and your finger just hovers over the send button.
You're completely paralyzed.
Yes, you are paralyzed. But feeling the fear, acknowledging that it's just your amygdala firing off an ancient warning and then shipping the work anyway, that is the actual skill of a linchpin.
Which brings up this incredible concept from the sources called the cult of done.
The cult of done. I love this.
It's basically the antidote to the resistance. The idea is to thrash early in a project, get all the messy, difficult, contentious decisions out of the way at the very beginning when the stakes are low.
Okay.
But once you commit, once you decide what the project is, you absolutely must ship it out the door, regardless of the fear of imperfect results.
Because perfectionism is just the lizard brain in a tuxedo.
Huh. That's a great way to put it. Mathematically, perfection is an asymptote.
Like the curve.
Right. It's a curve that gets closer and closer to a line, but infinitely stretches out and never actually touches it. You can always tweak one more word. You can always fix one more pixel. You can run one more focus group.
There's always an excuse.
Chasing perfection is the lizard brain's favorite, most socially acceptable excuse to delay shipping. Because as long as you're perfecting it, you're not sharing it, which means you can't be judged, which means you're safe.
Right. You have to separate your true conscience from your lizard brain and just build a habit of shipping. As saying in the text goes, done is the engine of more.
Done is the engine of more. If you ship it, you can iterate, you can get feedback. If you hide it in your hard drive forever, you learn absolutely nothing.
Okay, so we know we have to beat the lizard brain, and we know we have to deliver emotional labor. But how do we sustain that without just completely burning out?
It's a huge risk.
Because doing this kind of work, putting your humanity on the line every day, it sounds exhausting. And the sources suggest a linchpin needs two very specific mindsets to pull this off long term: total clarity and genuine generosity. Let's tackle clarity first.
The clarity aspect comes from a concept called prajna.
Prajna.
Right, it's a Buddhist term, and it translates roughly to discernment or seeing the world exactly as it is without any attachment to the outcome.
Which is incredibly hard to do. It means not wasting your mental energy wishing the world was different or getting intensely angry at reality. My absolute favorite story in the text illustrating this is the airport Zen story.
Oh, that's a classic.
So the author was on a flight that got diverted to Albany due to weather. They land and they're stuck on the tarmac staring down a 5-hour delay.
We've all been there. It's miserable.
It's the worst. And most people on the plane have a complete emotional meltdown. They are yelling at the flight attendants. They're fuming in their seats. They're demanding to speak to managers who aren't even there.
Because they remain deeply attached to the outcome they originally wanted.
Right.
They wanted the airline to magically fix the weather, undo the diversion, and teleport them to their original destination.
Exactly. And their anger didn't change the barometric pressure. It didn't fix the plane.
It just drained their own energy.
But the author, practicing prajna, simply accepted reality the exact moment it happened. He realized, okay, the system is broken. The airline cannot help me right now. So he calmly got off the plane, walked to the Hertz counter, rented a car, and then went back and offered free rides to anyone else heading the same way.
You see the exact same mindset in highly successful entrepreneurs. Think of the famous origin story of Richard Branson and Virgin Atlantic.
Oh, tell that one.
So decades ago, Branson is on a commercial flight out of Puerto Rico, and it gets canceled. Most people would freak out at the gate agent, but Branson accepted the reality instantly.
No attachment to the original flight.
None. He walked over to a charter desk, chartered a private plane, took a little chalkboard, wrote seats to Virgin Islands, $39,
Yeah.
and just walked around the terminal selling spots to his fellow stranded passengers.
That is incredible.
That is prajna in action. Seeing the reality, completely dropping the frustration about how things should be,
Yeah.
and just solving the actual problem in front of you.
The sources map this out beautifully into what they call the quadrants of discernment.
I love this matrix.
It's so good. It maps passion on one axis against attachment on the other. It's basically a matrix of every annoying person in your office. Let's walk through them.
Sure.
So if you have low passion for your work and high attachment to the outcome, you are a whiner.
The whiner. They want everything to go their way. They want the promotion. They want the easy project, but they have absolutely no passion or drive to actually do the work to get it.
Right. So when things don't go their way, they just complain endlessly.
Then you have low passion and low attachment. That's your bureaucrat.
The bureaucrat. They don't care about the work. And they don't care about the result. They just glide through the day, totally indifferent, stamping forms, just waiting for the clock to hit 5:00 p.m.
Exactly. They are the ultimate cog. But then we get to the really dangerous one. High passion, high attachment. This is the fundamentalist zealot.
Ooh.
They care deeply, which seems good at first, but they are so rigidly attached to their specific vision of how things must be that they will fight to the death to force the world to fit it. If a project pivots or a client changes their mind, the zealot absolutely crumbles or goes to total war.
And finally, we have the linchpin. The linchpin operates with high passion but low attachment.
That's the sweet spot.
They invest incredible, intense energy into doing the work, making the art, delivering the emotional labor. But, and this is the key differentiator, they aren't psychologically destroyed if the outcome isn't perfect.
Right.
If the client rejects the pitch, or if the market shifts overnight, they accept reality instantly and adapt. They don't take it personally.
Because their focus is on the process of the work, not the external validation of the result.
Yes.
And this clear vision, this prajna, is what allows them to engage in the second necessary mindset, the culture of gifts.
Okay, stop right there. Because this is where I read the source material and all my capitalist alarms went off.
It's a tricky concept.
It is. The text argues that linchpins give their art and their emotional labor without demanding immediate reciprocity. They give it as a gift. But giving gifts at work, isn't that basically just working for free? Well,
Like if capitalism is fundamentally a transactional exchange of my labor for their money, aren't we just letting massive corporations take advantage of us if we give these unreciprocated gifts of our emotional energy?
it's the most common and completely understandable pushback to this idea. It seems entirely counterintuitive to everything we're taught about business.
Right.
But if we dig deeper into how human networks actually operate, giving a gift is actually the most powerful leverage you can build.
How so?
Think about the typical transaction. Boss gives you an instruction manual, you execute the labor, boss gives you a paycheck, you are even. The transaction is completely closed.
Right. Clean and fair.
But it also keeps you entirely replaceable. If someone else will do the transaction for $1 less, you're out.
Okay, I track that.
If you add the gift, though, if you give unexpected insight on a project, if you take initiative to mentor someone when you didn't have to, if you forge a real connection with a client that wasn't strictly in your job description, you fundamentally change the dynamic.
You introduce a social imbalance. Yes. You stop being a commodity. You become a human being to them. In evolutionary psychology, genuine, uncalculated giving creates what we call an honest signal.
An honest signal.
It builds deep trust. It builds a tribe around you. And here's the thing. You cannot fake an honest signal.
Because people can tell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you were doing it manipulatively, just to leverage a raise next week,
Uh-huh.
people sense it immediately. The market, your customers, your boss, they can all smell the difference between a calculated transactional favor and a genuine gift of emotional labor.
Right.
But when you give the gift genuinely, you become indispensable to that network. You build leverage that a generic cog could never dream of.
I see. So if I'm just a commodity, the boss will always eventually swap me for a cheaper commodity. That's just math.
It's inevitable.
But if I am the emotional glue holding the team together, if I am the one solving the messy problems nobody else wants to touch, I am suddenly dictating my own value. So the application here isn't to just work 80 hours a week for free and get exploited. It's to stop trying to use mind control to force a transactional outcome every single time. Accept reality and generously give your best effort to solve the problem purely for the sake of the work itself.
Purely for the sake of the work. If you take care of the work, the leverage and the career progression genuinely take care of themselves.
That really feels like the grand unifying insight of this entire deep dive. If we step back and look at everything we've unpacked today, the era of the obedient, interchangeable cog is definitively over.
The factory is closed.
The old bargain that compliance equals safety is dead. The future belongs entirely to those who recognize that they already own the means of production. It's their minds, their laptops, their connectivity.
The soul of this material is realizing that your success is no longer dictated by a manager's manual. It is dictated by your willingness to quiet your lizard brain, push through the resistance, see the world clearly without angry attachment, and bravely give the gift of your unique, irreplaceable humanity.
You really have to step out of line and throw away the map.
You do.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a provocative thought to chew on. We've spent this entire time talking about how emotional labor is the one thing machines can't do. It's our moat, right?
Right.
But look at what's happening right now with artificial intelligence. We are seeing AI models that can mimic empathy, that can write personalized, incredibly human-sounding emails, that can act as therapists or customer service agents with literally infinite patience.
It's moving so fast.
So if the machine learns to mimic the linchpin, is the emotional labor we just talked about going to be the next thing automated? Where do we run to when the algorithm learns how to fake a gift?
Oh man, that is the existential question for the next decade of work.
Something to keep you up at night. But now that we know the factory is gone and the linchpin is the only one who survives the current landscape, it leaves another massive question hanging in the air. If we are all stepping out of line, throwing away the map, and doing our own emotional labor, how do we actually organize and lead these new tribes without everything descending into total chaos?
We need a new structure.
We do. And we'll dive into exactly how to navigate that wilderness and build a movement in our next deep dive. Until then, remember that the machine that promised to take care of you is broken. It's time to build something better. You know, from the time we're old enough to basically hold a crayon, we are sold this very specific, deeply comforting promise.
Right.
It's essentially the ultimate bargain of modern society. And the deal is incredibly simple. It's you keep your head down, you do your homework, you follow the instructions to the letter, you don't make too much noise, and in exchange...
The system takes care of you.
Exactly. The system promises to take care of you.
It's a remarkably neat, linear equation. Obedience equals security.
Yeah.
You hand over your compliance, your prime waking hours, your willingness to conform, and in return, the corporate apparatus just hands you a steady paycheck, health insurance, 2 weeks of paid vacation, and eventually a pension.
Right?
I mean, it is the foundational mythology of the 20th century.
It really is, and it feels as natural as gravity to most of us. But what if it's not? I mean, what if that safe, reliable career path you were promised was actually just a century-long scam? What if it was a massive, coordinated indoctrination designed to make you an easily replaceable low-wage cog in a machine that fundamentally, just does not care about you?
Well, that is the incredibly jarring reality we are confronting right now, because the comforting illusion of the industrial age, that paternalistic safety net you're talking about, it's shattering, in real time.
Yeah.
And a vast majority of the workforce is just left holding the broken pieces, wondering why the rules they memorized basically no longer apply.
Exactly. And that is the core premise of our deep dive today into Seth Godin's chapter, The New World of Work. We are exploring the complete, undeniable collapse of the industrial factory mindset economy. We're looking at the death of attendance-based compensation. So for anyone listening, whether you're, interested in business, mapping out your career growth, scaling an enterprise, or honestly just trying to survive and thrive in the modern economy, understanding this shift is absolutely crucial.
Essential.
Because the future of work no longer belongs to the obedient rule followers who desperately try to fit in. It belongs to linchpins, these indispensable, undeniable individuals who bring humanity, art, and highly unique value to what they do.
It's a profound tectonic shift from a world optimized for compliance to a world desperate for creativity.
Yeah.
But to truly understand where we're going and how to navigate this new landscape, we really have to understand how we got here in the first place.
Right.
Because the system we're currently trying to escape, that cubicle mindset, it wasn't an accident of nature. It was very deliberately engineered.
Okay, let's unpack this cause. For generations, we've been completely conditioned to believe that this take-care-of-you bargain is the natural order of human existence, right?
Right.
You surrender your individual genius, you grab a company manual, and you just follow the steps. But the source material traces this assumption back to a very specific, pivotal point in history. It brings up Adam Smith and his famous pin-making factory. Now, most people know Adam Smith as the father of modern economics, but his observations on the division of labor, they fundamentally changed the psychological relationship between a human being and their work.
That is exactly the starting point. So Smith observed a fascinating dynamic. If you have a highly skilled artisan, like a master metal worker, making pins by hand from start to finish, it takes an extraordinary amount of time.
Right, they have to do everything.
Exactly. They have to draw the wire, straighten it, cut it, point it, grind it for the head. And they take pride in that final product, but they can only produce, a handful of pins a day.
Yeah.
But Smith realized that if you break that holistic process down into tiny, repetitive, completely mindless tasks, so one person only cuts the wire, another person only sharpens the point, another only attaches the head, you suddenly don't need highly skilled artisans anymore.
You completely eliminate the need for mastery.
Exactly. You can hire barely trained, incredibly low-paid workers to follow one incredibly simple instruction over and over again for 14 hours a day. And suddenly, by stripping the art out of the work, you're producing tens of thousands of pins a day.
It's the absolute birth of extreme, ruthless efficiency. And what is fascinating is how this philosophy bled out of just making consumer goods and into literally every facet of human organization. Like the source material talks about a French general, Jean-Baptiste Gribeauval,
Right.
and he's operating in the 1760s. He pushed for the concept of interchangeable parts, specifically in military muskets. Cause prior to this, every single gun on a battlefield was custom crafted by a gunsmith.
Which is crazy to think about now.
Right. If a trigger broke during a battle, you couldn't just grab a trigger from another gun. It wouldn't fit. You needed a blacksmith to craft a specific, unique trigger for that specific, unique gun.
Which is just a logistical nightmare when you're trying to supply a massive army. So Gribeauval realized that if you forced manufacturers to create standardized parts to exact specifications, a soldier on a battlefield could just scavenge a broken part from a fallen comrade's weapon, slot it in, and keep firing.
It was brilliant for warfare. I mean, Thomas Jefferson actually witnessed this system in France and vigorously championed it in the U.S.
Wow.
And eventually, a few generations later, Henry Ford took this concept to its absolute zenith with the automotive assembly line.
Right.
But the terrifying part, the part that fundamentally shifted human history, is that Ford didn't just perfect the concept of interchangeable parts for machines. He realized that for the system to be truly perfectly efficient, he needed to perfect the concept of interchangeable workers.
And that is the crux of the industrial age.
Yeah.
The goal wasn't just to standardize the metal and the gears. It was to standardize the human beings operating them. The logic is brutal but effective. If a worker gets sick or demands a living wage or quits or has a brilliant but disruptive idea, the factory owner shouldn't have to miss a beat. You just pull that defective human part off the assembly line and slot a fresh, identical human part right into the empty space.
Wow.
No friction, no lost productivity. We fundamentally became standardized, fungible parts in a machine owned by someone else.
And because we were all born into this system, we genuinely think this is just how human beings naturally operate. We think having a job where a manager tells you what to do is as timeless as breathing.
Yeah.
But the text provides this incredible visual analogy to put the time scale of human history into perspective. So imagine a stack of 400 quarters sitting on a table.
Okay, that would be a substantial stack, well over 2 feet high.
Right. Now imagine that each one of those individual quarters represents 250 years of human tribal organisms. That entire towering stack signifies the roughly 100,000 years we have been operating as organized, cooperating human tribes. Now, if you look at that massive stack of human history, only the single, very top quarter represents the era of factories, industrialization, and the modern concept of jobs.
One single quarter out of 400.
Just one. The other 399 coins, like the vast, overwhelming bulk of human existence, represent a completely different view of commerce, of culture, of survival, and of daily life. For almost all of human history, we were hunters, gatherers, artisans, farmers, storytellers. We were directly connected to the value we created. This factory mindset, this idea of commuting to a building where a boss hands you a manual and tells you exactly what to do for 8 hours, it's an incredibly recent, completely man-made invention. It is a historical anomaly. It is not a permanent, unchangeable human condition.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains so much of our modern anxiety. We have built our entire global society, our physical cities, our traffic patterns, and most importantly, our education system around the logic of that single top quarter.
Yeah.
We have optimized everything for a system that is fundamentally alien to our historical nature.
No, I want to dig into that education piece because this is where the text gets incredibly provocative, and frankly, it is where I struggle a bit.
Okay.
Because the natural reaction for a lot of us, myself included, is to look at the modern education system and say, schools are fundamentally broken. Kids aren't learning how to be creative. They're just stressed out, memorizing disconnected facts for standardized tests and regurgitating them to get a grade.
Right.
We look at it as a failure of policy, but the source material makes a really bold claim. It argues that schools aren't broken at all.
Not at all.
In fact, it says they are working exactly, perfectly as intended. They were explicitly designed to produce obedient literalists, note-takers, and manual readers who are terrified of standing out. I mean, is that really fair? Isn't it just an underfunded system trying to do its best rather than some, grand conspiracy?
It sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know,
Yeah.
but it's actually just documented economic history.
Really?
Yeah. The industrialists of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, titans like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, the people who literally funded the creation of the modern public school system, they faced a massive logistical problem.
Mm-hmm.
They were building these gargantuan factories, and they needed millions of compliant workers to man them.
Right, because farmers didn't want to stand in a dark room pulling a lever for 12 hours a day.
Exactly. Farmers are used to operating on their own schedule, driven by the weather and the seasons. Artisans are used to controlling their own creative outplay. The industrialists didn't need independent thinkers. They didn't need rebels or philosophers or people who questioned authority.
Yeah.
They needed people who would show up exactly on time, tolerate mind-numbing repetitive tasks without losing focus, and follow strict instructions from a foreman without ever asking why.
Wow.
So they essentially engineered and funded the educational industrial complex to instill those exact values. Think about the structure of a traditional school. You sit in straight rows.
Yeah.
You move from room to room based on the ringing of a loud bell, which is a direct mimicry of the factory bell.
All right.
You are punished for talking out of turn, for collaborating, which they call cheating,
Right.
and you were rewarded purely for memorizing the approved manual and repeating it back perfectly.
It is literal factory prep. We grade obedience. We
Yeah.
make children ask for a pass just to use the restroom, training them to seek permission from management for basic bodily functions.
Precisely. The system was meticulously designed to increase compliance and, by extension, corporate profit margins. It systematically, year by year, bakes out the natural curiosity, the risk-taking, and the artistry that we all inherently possess as children.
It's a really sobering thought because it reframes everything. The realization that our deep-seated adult desire to just have a boss tell us what to do, to just have a clear syllabus that tells us exactly what is going to be on the performance review, that desire is not a personal character flaw.
Yeah.
It's a learned, carefully indoctrinated fear. We have been trained for 12 to 16 years to aggressively seek out the map, to ask for the rubric, to beg for the rules.
And the practical takeaway here for anyone listening is that you have to actively, consciously unlearn that habit.
Yeah.
You have to realize that the anxiety you feel when you don't know the right answer isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that the training is wearing off. You have to stop waiting for someone to hand you a map, because in the new economy we are entering, the map fundamentally does not exist anymore.
Which brings us perfectly to the next major pillar of this transition. In that old factory economy, the absolute driving force, the holy grail for a business owner, was to have the highest possible PERL. That acronym stands for the percentage of easily replaced laborers.
It is the ultimate capitalist metric for a factory.
Yeah.
The logic is inescapable. If a job can be completely documented, if every single motion can be written down and put into a comprehensive manual, it means the person executing that job is 100% easily replaced.
Right.
And if you are easily replaced, you have zero leverage. If you have zero leverage, you can be paid the absolute minimum wage the market will bear. The higher a factory's PERL, the more power the owner has, and the higher their profit margins.
The source material takes a really sharp, direct critique at a classic business book to illustrate this. Michael E. Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for decades, if you went to business school or started a franchise, this book was treated as the absolute gospel. Gerber explicitly advised entrepreneurs to build business models that depend on people with the lowest possible level of skill.
Right.
His entire thesis was that you should create such a flawless, idiot-proof system that you didn't need brilliant, expensive people to run it. You just needed cheap, ordinary, highly replaceable people to execute your brilliant system.
And to be fair, in a localized 20th century economy, that sounds incredibly efficient. It's the McDonald's model.
Yeah, exactly.
But the text points out the fatal existential flaw in that logic for today's hyper-connected world.
Okay.
If you build the business filled with rigid rules and procedures perfectly designed for the lowest skilled, cheapest labor, you inevitably, unavoidably produce a product that is completely devoid of humanity, personalization, or genuine connection.
Right.
It becomes a sterile commodity. And when your product or service has zero humanity, the only possible metric you can compete on is price.
And competing on price is a terrifying, desperate race to the bottom because guess what? Thanks to globalization and the internet, someone, somewhere in the world, is always willing to do it cheaper than you.
Always.
If you're racing to the bottom, the absolute worst thing that can happen is that you might actually win.
Which is exactly what the law of the mechanical Turk illustrates so beautifully.
Oh yeah, explain that.
So the text brings up the historical mechanical Turk. Back in the 18th century, there was this famous supposed automaton. It was a fake clockwork machine that could supposedly play chess against human opponents and win.
Right, like a magic robot.
Exactly. It toured Europe and amazed everyone. But the secret was that there was an actual human chess master hidden inside the cabinet, moving the pieces with magnets.
Right.
Today, Amazon has a massive web service literally named after it, Amazon Mechanical Turk. It's a platform where corporations can outsource millions of digital microtasks to a massive, invisible global workforce for literal pennies.
It is the ultimate expression of PERL.
Yeah.
And the text uses the ultimate devastating example of this dynamic in action. Wikipedia versus the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, this is a great example.
This is the story of how the factory model gets destroyed. Because Britannica spent 250 years and roughly $100 million building this massive, physical, authoritative reference work. They had full-time, highly paid editors, rigorous hierarchies, massive printing presses. It was a perfect factory. Then Wikipedia came along and absolutely thoroughly destroyed them.
Yep.
And they did it using free distributed labor.
But we have to ask how and why they managed to do that.
Yeah.
How did Wikipedia make free labor reliable?
Yeah.
They did it by breaking the monumental task of writing an encyclopedia down into such tiny, discrete, predictable parts. Fixing a typo, adding a citation, writing one paragraph about a local river.
Small enough that millions of people could contribute in microbursts.
Exactly. But the why is even more important. Why did people do it for free? Because unlike the factory worker pulling a lever for a wage, the Wikipedia editors were driven by intrinsic motivation. They were driven by status within the community, by a passion for a specific niche topic, by the desire to build something collaborative. Wikipedia didn't just digitize Britannica, it completely bypassed the factory motivation system.
And that brings up the really uncomfortable reality for modern workers. Because we tend to think of factory work as inherently blue-collar, right?
Sure.
Picture hard hats, steel-toed boots, heavy machinery, sparks flying. But the text argues that white-collar work is absolutely still factory work if it is highly measured, scripted, and optimized for predictable productivity.
Absolutely.
If you're sitting in a pristine, air-conditioned cubicle processing health insurance claims based on a strict 400-page set of rules, or if you're typing code that just strictly follows a rigid, inflexible spec sheet handed down by management, you're working on an assembly line. You just happen to be wearing a nicer shirt and sitting in an ergonomic chair.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? If any project can be broken down into sufficiently small, predictable parts, and if we have global connectivity and advancing automation, then that work can be accomplished for awfully close to free.
Yeah.
So how do you survive when your white-collar job is being subjected to this exact same race to the bottom?
The source provides this incredibly chilling, vivid image to drive this home. It talks about a guy named Hector in Queens.
Right.
Hector is a day laborer. Every morning he stands on a specific street corner in New York, bundled up against the cold, waiting for a contractor to drive by in a pickup truck and pick him for cheap, minimum wage, back-breaking physical labor. To the contractor driving by, all the men standing on that corner look exactly the same.
Unfungible.
Exactly. They are all offering the exact same basic commodity, cheap, obedient muscle. It's a heartbreaking situation.
It is a stark, uncomfortable image of human commoditization.
It really is. But the terrifying parallel the source draws is that a standard, rule-following, typo-free resume sitting in a massive corporate stack on a recruiter's desk is exactly like Hector waiting on the street corner in the cold.
Wow.
It's a fungible, cheap commodity waiting to be picked. It's like being a generic brand of flour on the supermarket shelf. There is no difference between your bag and the bag next to you, except maybe you're a few cents cheaper. If all you offer an employer is that you meticulously check their boxes, you perfectly meet the specs, and you promise to follow the rules, you're just waiting on the corner hoping someone picks you over the 500 identical resumes sitting right next to you.
And you have to remember, the corporate contractor is always, always going to look for the cheapest possible option that meets the minimum specs. If your job can be broken down into a series of predictable steps, you are no longer competing for a promotion with the person in the cubicle next to you.
No.
You're competing on price against a highly educated worker in Mumbai willing to work for a fraction of your salary.
Right.
And increasingly, you are competing against artificial intelligence. You're
Yeah.
competing against large language models that can process those insurance claims or write that boilerplate code in 3 seconds for fractions of a cent.
It's wild.
The takeaway here is extremely urgent. You have to stop fighting to be the cheapest or the most obedient. You will lose that race.
Yeah.
Automation and globalization will always beat you on price and obedience. You have to start racing to the top by being remarkable.
Which perfectly sets up the next major consequence of this shift. The end of attendance-based compensation, or what we can call ABC, and the subsidization of the mediocre. Because that factory era is crumbling, the whole foundational concept of getting paid just to show up is dying right alongside it.
In the old system, the math was simple. If you unlocked the door, sat at your desk for 8 hours, looked somewhat busy, and didn't actively break the machinery, you got paid.
Right.
Your physical attendance was the primary metric of value. But the text points out a really insidious hidden side effect of this traditional wage structure.
Oh, yeah.
In these rule-following factory-style jobs, standard wage bands mean that the truly exceptional performers are actually vastly underpaid relative to the actual value they generate.
Let's break down the math on that because it is infuriating once you see it. Say a company has a standard pay rate for a position. Let's say they pay $20 an hour.
Okay.
Now, let's say you're a superstar employee. Through your efficiency or your insight, you actually generate $50 of value for the company every hour. But you only get paid $20. Why? Because the company has to balance the overall books. They have to use that extra $30 of value you created to cover the losses of the mediocre worker sitting next to you.
Right.
The guy who is also getting paid $20 an hour, but is only generating $15 of value because he does the bare minimum required by the manual.
Exactly. The exceptional worker is literally mathematically subsidizing the mediocre worker who just barely meets the specs.
Yeah.
It is a system specifically designed to protect and elevate the average at the direct expense of the exceptional.
It's like going out to a group dinner, ordering a side salad and a water, and then splitting the bill evenly with 3 people who ordered steaks and multiple margaritas. You're paying for their consumption.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But here is the critical shift. As the factory system breaks down and as global competition becomes infinitely more fierce, companies can no longer afford to carry the weight of the mediocre.
Right.
They can no longer afford to overpay average workers just for showing up. They are frantically looking for difference makers, for people who generate outsized returns.
So what does a difference maker actually look like in practice? The text shares this really beautiful contrasting story about a kid named Zeke.
I love this part.
Yeah, Zeke is a 2-year-old on an airplane. Now, if you've ever been on a plane with a toddler, you know what this looks like. For the entire flight, Zeke is not sitting quietly in his assigned seat with his seatbelt fastened. He's standing up, he's aggressively exploring, he's touching the textures of the seats, he's reacting to the ding of the overhead light.
He's just taking it all in.
He's asking his parents 100 questions, he's smiling at strangers and demanding their attention. He is deeply, intensely engaging with his physical and social environment. The text argues that Zeke, in that moment, is acting like a natural-born artist.
He is operating entirely on intrinsic curiosity. He hasn't had that engagement drilled out of him yet by the educational industrial complex.
Exactly. Now, contrast Zeke's vibrant energy with the adults on that exact same plane. The text calls them the TGIF laborers and the bureaucrats. These are the adults who are just staring blankly at the seat back in front of them, completely checked out, waiting for the flight to end, waiting for the workday to end, waiting for the weekend to finally start so they can actually live.
Right.
They have entirely lost that spark. But the irony is that that spark, that unscripted human engagement, is exactly what the modern economy values most. Look at a company like Trader Joe's. I love this example. Trader Joe's does not win by being the absolute cheapest place on earth to buy a can of beans.
No, definitely not.
You can go to a massive, soulless megamart for that. Trader Joe's wins because they employ highly engaged humans who actively create a fun, quirky, remarkable shopping experience.
And this synthesizes a massive critical shift in consumer behavior. Because of the internet, consumers are no longer blindly loyal to cheap commodities. We have infinite, frictionless access to the absolute cheapest goods on the planet via Amazon or Alibaba.
Right.
So price is no longer a differentiator. What we actively crave now, what we will actually pay a premium for, is the unique, the human, and the remarkable. When a cashier at Trader Joe's makes a genuine, unscripted connection with you or helps you find a new product with actual enthusiasm, they are performing what we call emotional labor.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they are acting like an artist, completely off script, not like a vending machine.
And that emotional labor is impossible to automate. You cannot write a manual for genuine empathy or enthusiasm. So the practical takeaway here for the listener is a massive wake-up call. Average is officially over. If you are an exceptional worker who is currently trapped in a factory-style job, you need to realize that you're just subsidizing your boss's bottom line and your mediocre coworker salaries. Your goal moving forward should not be to produce more perfectly compliant factory output at standard factory wages. Your goal must be to bring so much unique humanity, so much complex emotional labor, and so much original insight to your role that the mere fact that you attended work is the absolute least interesting thing about you.
You want to be judged and compensated on the art you create, the unique problems you solve, and the connections you foster, not the hours your keycard was logged at a desk.
Right.
Which transitions us to the final and perhaps most empowering concept in this entire framework.
Yeah.
Owning the means of production and the rise of what the source calls the third class.
This part is fascinating because it uses historical macroeconomic frameworks to explain our current everyday reality. The source points out that Karl Marx and Adam Smith, two foundational economists who are essentially on complete opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, they actually agreed on one core foundational concept about the nature of work.
Yes, and I think it's important to clarify here that the text is presenting this purely as a historical economic framework to understand the structural power dynamics of work.
Oh, of course.
It is not an endorsement of either Marxist political theory or purely unchecked capitalist ideology. We are just looking at the mechanics of the system.
Right, just the system itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the shared framework is that historically, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, there were two distinct, strictly defined teams: management and labor.
Okay.
Management, or the bourgeoisie in Marx's terms, were the people who owned the capital, the physical factories, and the expensive machines. Labor, the proletariat, did not have the massive amount of capital required to build their own factories. Therefore, their only option for survival was to sell their time, their physical bodies, and follow the rules dictated by management.
It was a strict, inescapable binary system. You were either born into the class that owned the factory or you worked on the floor of it. Management fundamentally wanted the maximum amount of work for the minimum amount of pay, and labor just desperately tried to survive the exchange and avoid getting injured. But the massive, world-altering breakthrough of our current era, the reason everything is changing so fast is that a third team has finally emerged.
Yes.
The source calls them the linchpins.
And this third team exists entirely because the barrier to entry for owning a factory has completely, breathtakingly vanished.
How so?
Well, the text points out that today, a $3,000 laptop and a high-speed internet connection is, for all practical intents and purposes, an entire factory. It is a printing press, a global broadcasting station, a retail storefront, and a logistics hub all rolled into one. The worker now literally physically owns the means of production.
It completely flips the historical power dynamic. You no longer need the factory owner's permission or their massive capital investment to reach the global market. The text gives some really great concrete examples of this in action. It mentions Brian Clark, who built an absolute fortune creating and selling WordPress themes from his computer. Or Perez Hilton, who built a massive, highly influential media empire just by blogging from coffee shops.
Right.
Or an artist like Abby Ryan, who makes over $100,000 a year painting one tiny, beautiful oil painting every single day and selling it directly to her buyers on eBay. They don't have a corporate boss. They don't have a physical assembly line. They don't have a massive corporate HR infrastructure. They are the worker, but they also own the factory.
It's an amazing shift.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit because I think it's easy to romanticize this. Sure, a laptop is a factory and Abby Ryan can sell on eBay, but aren't we just trading one dictator for another?
What do you mean?
Well, if I'm a YouTuber, YouTube is the factory. If they change the algorithm, my business dies overnight. If I sell on Amazon, Amazon is the foreman taking their cut and dictating the terms. Is the algorithm just the new factory boss? Are we really free, or are we just gig economy sharecroppers?
That is a phenomenal piece of pushback and is a very real danger.
Yeah.
If you treat YouTube or Amazon or Uber like a traditional boss, if you just wait for the algorithm to hand you a task or an audience, then yes, you are absolutely just a digital sharecropper. You are Hector on the digital street corner waiting for the algorithm to pick you.
Right.
But that is where the concept of the linchpin becomes critical. A true linchpin uses the platform, but they own the relationship with the audience. They own their brand, their email list, their unique perspective. If YouTube shuts down tomorrow, a linchpin's true fans will follow them to the next platform because the value is in the human connection, not the algorithmic distribution.
Ah, okay. So the laptop is the tool, but the actual means of production is your mind and your relationship with your community.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how this shifts the entire hierarchy of value in our economy. If you picture the economy as a massive staircase, at the very bottom is lifting, manual labor, moving boxes, digging ditches.
Right.
It is absolutely necessary for society to function, but it is highly commoditized and easily replaceable.
Hmm.
In the middle of the staircase, you have selling and managing, the people who coordinate the lifters. But at the very top of the staircase is creating, inventing, and connecting.
Yeah.
Historically, you needed the factory owner to grant you access to that top tier, usually by promoting you through the corporate ranks over 30 years of loyal obedience.
But not anymore. You can just bypass the stairs entirely.
Precisely. Because you own the means of production, your laptop, your smartphone, your unique creativity, you do not need anyone's permission to access the top tier. You do not need a gatekeeper to publish your book or distribute your music or fund your software idea.
But you can just start.
You can just start creating. You can be the artist who creates the value and the capitalist who captures the profit simultaneously.
So if you're listening to this right now, the takeaway is massive and deeply personal. You already possess the machinery. You have the tools sitting on your desk or in your pocket right now. The existential question is, what are you doing with them? Are you using those incredible tools to just follow someone else's manual, like mechanically typing data into a spreadsheet for a boss, essentially using a supercomputer as a digital shovel?
Oh, what a phrase.
Right. Or are you using those tools to invent, to connect, and to create undeniable value that no one else in the world can replicate?
You have to make the psychological shift. You have to stop acting like a laborer waiting to be given a task and start acting like an owner who autonomously directs their own energy.
So what does this all mean for us tomorrow morning? We've covered a lot of ground. We've deconstructed the history of the factory system, the terrifying race to the bottom with the mechanical Turk, the mathematical death of attendance-based pay, and the empowerment of owning the means of production. How do we synthesize all of this into something actionable?
The soul of this entire chapter, the core truth that ties all of this together, is a profound, albeit highly uncomfortable realization. The comforting, paternalistic promise of the corporate factory system, the deal that if you are obedient, you will be safe, is entirely dead.
Yeah.
It is a ghost. We are currently living through a massive, unprecedented economic transition, and transitions are always dangerous.
They really are.
The text uses a brilliant analogy, likening our current moment to the very early days of widespread electricity.
Oh, okay.
When houses first got wired for electricity, people did not understand the new infrastructure. They were used to gaslighting.
Right. Yeah.
So they would go out and buy a brand new powerful electric washing machine, bring it home, unscrew a delicate glass light bulb from the ceiling, and try to plug the heavy appliance's bare wires directly into the light socket.
And they would start a massive fire or electrocute themselves in the process because the wires couldn't handle the load.
Exactly, because they were trying to violently force the logic and the appliances of a powerful new system into the fragile infrastructure of an old system.
Wow.
That is exactly precisely what is happening in the global economy right now. Millions of people are trying to apply the old rules of obedience, resume polishing, standardized test taking, and keeping their heads down to a new economy that violently punishes those exact behaviors.
It's like trying to plug a washing machine into a light bulb socket.
Trying to plug your old compliance into the new economy is absolute career suicide. The wires will burn out.
Because the entire infrastructure of how value is created has fundamentally changed. The smell of burning wires is the feeling of sending out 500 identical resumes and hearing absolutely nothing back.
It is. The only true security left in this new world is not in blending in. It is not in being average. True security is found in making the brave, terrifying, emotional choice to stop being a fungible cog. You must actively choose to become an indispensable artist in whatever work you do. Whether you are a programmer, a barista, a middle manager, or a CEO, you have to bring humanity, insight, and genuine connection to your role, making yourself a linchpin that the organization or the market simply cannot easily replace.
But that leaves us with a truly fascinating and slightly overwhelming question to chew on. If the secret to survival is that everyone needs to stop being a compliant cog and become a unique, indispensable linchpin, what happens when everyone actually does it?
Oh, that's the big question.
Right. If everyone becomes an extraordinary artist in their work, does extraordinary just become the new baseline average? Does the whole concept of a structured economy break down, or does it evolve into a society of micro-entrepreneurs that looks completely unrecognizable to us today?
It's going to be a wild ride.
That is the threshold we are standing on. Next time, we'll dive into how to actually begin that transformation, even when that little voice in your head is screaming at you to hide.
So, are you a white-collar worker who thinks you've successfully escaped the mindless drudgery of the factory?
Oh, that's
The mental image, right? You picture the soot and the heavy machinery.
right, the deafening noise.
Yeah, the punch clocks and all that. And you sit back in your nice ergonomic chair and think, oh, I'm safe. I'm a knowledge worker.
Yeah, exactly.
But what if your air-conditioned office and your predictable daily tasks and your neatly formatted spreadsheets are just a modern assembly line with slightly better lighting and, free coffee in the break room?
It is a genuinely unsettling premise, to be honest,
It really is.
because we crave those visible distinctions. We want to believe that moving from the shop floor to the cubicle fundamentally changed the nature of our work, that wearing a suit or a nice sweater somehow insulates us from the mechanics of industrialization.
Right, like we're doing brain work now.
Exactly. But if you strip away the aesthetics and look at the underlying structure of how that white-collar work is actually managed and measured and compensated, that feeling of safety reveals itself to be a complete illusion.
Wow. And that illusion is exactly what we are dismantling today.
Let's do it.
In this deep dive, we are exploring the critical concepts of art and initiative. We really want to understand why the traditional, safe, reliable job is just vanishing right before our eyes.
It really is disappearing.
Yeah. We're going to look at a massive shift in the global economy where the internet has completely democratized the means of production.
Right.
And because of that shift, anyone who wants to survive in business or entrepreneurship has to stop acting like a replaceable cog.
Right, you have to stop.
And start doing the terrifying but essential work of becoming an indispensable artist.
And I think it's important to say the stakes on this transition are absolute.
They really are.
This isn't just a fleeting management trend or a buzzword you can ignore until it goes away, like, synergy or whatever.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental tectonic rewiring of the global economy. If you are still playing by the 20th century rules of safety and compliance and keeping your head down, well, you are exposing your career and your livelihood to massive existential risk.
So let's start at the very beginning with how we are naturally wired before the economy gets its hands on us.
Okay, yeah.
Think about a 2-year-old child on an airplane. Let's call him Zeke.
Oh, man, I've sat next to Zeke.
Right. If you have ever been within 50 feet of a toddler on a flight, you know exactly what this looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Zeke is not just sitting quietly in his assigned seat, staring forward, waiting for instructions.
Not at all.
He is standing up. He is poking the seatbelt buckle.
He's pulling the tray table down and up.
Exactly. He is smiling at the person in the row behind him, asking questions, dropping his toy to see if gravity still works.
Right, testing every single boundary of his environment.
Yes. It is pure, unadulterated, exhausting initiative.
And that behavior is our factory setting as human beings.
Right.
We are all born with that innate drive to figure things out, to push boundaries, to interact dynamically with the world. We are, by nature, explorers and problem solvers.
Yeah, we don't wait for a manual to tell us how to interact with the new environment.
We just dive in. But then we grow up.
We do. And something actively bakes that curiosity right out of us.
It really does.
I mean, we go through over a decade of schooling where the primary metric of success is sitting still.
Raising your hand before speaking.
Yes. And bubbling in the correct multiple choice answer with a number 2 pencil.
Right.
Then we graduate and enter the corporate world, and it feels like we've just traded our childhood sandbox for a cubicle.
That's a great way to put it.
Except the cubicle is a highly supervised sandbox, where a manager hands you a manual on exactly how to build a predetermined, standardized sandcastle.
Yeah, you aren't rewarded for finding a new way to play with the sand.
No, not at all.
You're rewarded for building the castle exactly as drawn on time and under budget.
So true.
And to understand why that manual exists, we have to look at the economic architecture of the last 150 years. The entire modern economy was built on the foundation of physical factories.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of the industrialist was to take raw materials and turn them into finished products as cheaply, quickly, and reliably as possible.
Makes sense.
To achieve that level of massive scale, factory owners needed compliant, low-paid, replaceable parts.
And the most crucial yet volatile parts of that machine were human beings.
Yes. Management needed people who would follow instructions to the letter without asking questions.
Right, because if you're working on a literal assembly line, initiative is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
You don't want the person whose job it is to put the wheels on the car to suddenly get creative.
No.
And try putting the wheels on the roof just to see how it looks.
Right, you need them to put the wheels on the exact same way 1,000 times a day.
Yeah, predictability equaled profit.
And initiative was considered a defect.
Wow, a defect.
Yeah, so society built an entire educational and cultural infrastructure to train people for that specific environment. We created schools that functioned like pre-factories.
With the bells ringing to change classes.
Exactly. Conditioned people to obey authority and punish deviation.
But as we moved into the late 20th century, physical manufacturing became heavily automated or moved offshore.
Right, and the middle class largely shifted into offices.
But here is the catch.
The fatal flaw, however, was that management took the exact same factory mindset into the white-collar world.
Which is how we end up with the spreadsheets and the standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
So even if I'm pushing a pencil or entering data into a CRM system or processing insurance claims, my work is still planned, controlled, measured, and optimized for productivity.
It is.
I am still just following a recipe.
And for a long time, that white-collar factory model was incredibly successful.
I mean, it built the middle class, right?
It did. Machines had replaced physical labor, but businesses still needed humans for mental rote tasks. They needed people to answer phones, route paperwork, do basic data entry or balance ledgers.
Yeah.
Management couldn't automate cognitive tasks yet. So they treated human brains like rudimentary computers to get them done.
But the landscape has shifted underneath us now.
It has drastically.
Those very human computers are now being replaced by actual computers.
Right, by software.
By artificial intelligence. And by an interconnected global workforce.
Exactly.
So the safety we all felt in our office jobs was basically a temporary glitch.
It was.
It was just a holding pattern until the technology caught up to the mental rote tasks.
It was an anomaly of a specific era.
Wow.
The practical application of this reality requires a ruthless audit of your daily life.
Okay, how do we do that?
Look at what you do from 9 to 5.
Okay.
If your work can be perfectly documented in a step-by-step manual, if someone could read a binder and execute exactly what you do without injecting any unique insight or human connection, you are doing factory work.
Oh, man.
And if you are doing factory work, you are standing on the tracks waiting for the train of automation or outsourcing to run you over.
Wait, hold on. I need to challenge this because this sounds incredibly bleak.
I know it does.
You're saying that doing my job perfectly and being reliable, which are the exact things my parents and teachers told me to do, is actually making me a target for replacement.
Yes.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If I'm good at my job, if I never make a mistake on my spreadsheets, shouldn't I be safe?
It seems counterintuitive.
I know.
Because it violates the core promise of the industrial era.
Exactly. I feel like I followed the rules.
But let's look at the mechanics of what happens when you perfectly execute a standardized task.
Okay.
When your entire competitive advantage is that you follow the rules and produce an average predictable result, you turn yourself into a commodity.
A commodity.
Yes. And when you are a commodity, the market only evaluates you on one metric: price.
Oh, I see.
Competing on price is a race to the bottom. And it's a race to find the absolute cheapest, fastest option available.
Right. And we do this all the time as consumers without even thinking about it.
We do.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Well, if I need a giant jar of pickles, I don't care who made them or the artisan story behind them.
Right.
I just want the cheapest jar, so I go to Walmart.
Exactly.
Or if I want to book a standard flight from New York to Chicago, I don't call a neighborhood travel agent and pay them a fee to do it for me.
No, you go to Travelocity or Expedia and pick the lowest fare.
Yeah, Exactly.
And that exact same ruthless consumer dynamic applies to labor.
Oh, wow.
When work is standardized, the person paying for the work acts just like the person buying the pickles.
Yeah, they just want the cheapest, reliable option.
Right. Consider the example of the entrepreneur John Jantsch from the book.
Okay, yeah.
He needed an audio interview transcribed. In the old economy, he would have hired a professional transcriber, paid a premium industry rate, and waited a few days.
Sure. That's how it used to work.
Instead, he utilized a service powered by Amazon's Mechanical Turk.
Now, I've heard of Mechanical Turk,
Well,
but how does it actually drive the price down so dramatically?
it comes down to fragmentation. The service took Jansch's audio file and chopped it up into tiny minute-long segments.
Wow, really just 1 minute each.
Exactly. It then distributed those microtasks to an invisible, anonymous army of laborers scattered around the globe.
Oh my gosh.
Because the task was so small and so perfectly standardized, just type what you hear for 60 seconds,
Right.
the skill required dropped to virtually zero.
Because anyone can type for 60 seconds.
Right. And when the skill requirement drops to zero, the labor pool expands to literally anyone on Earth with an internet connection.
So he isn't competing for local transcribers anymore.
No. Jansch got his audio perfectly transcribed in record time for roughly 30% of the traditional cost. Fast and cheap won completely.
That is mind-blowing.
It really is.
And terrifying, honestly. If my job can be broken down into those tiny, predictable parts, I am actively competing against an invisible army of people who are willing to do it for pennies.
It exposes a brutal economic law. Any project, if broken down into sufficiently small, predictable parts, can be accomplished for awfully close to free.
But what about the middle class?
Yeah.
We were promised that if we put our heads down, worked hard, and didn't rock the boat, we would be taken care of.
That promise was a mathematical impossibility in a globalized, digitized world.
Really mathematically impossible.
Let's examine the economic math of mediocrity that props up the traditional corporate structure.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you run a company and your business model relies on standard, manual-driven tasks.
All right.
You decide you are going to pay everyone on the floor a standard wage of $20 an hour.
Which sounds completely fair on the surface. Equal pay for equal time.
Right. It assumes everyone is an identical cog. But humans aren't cogs.
No, we're not.
You are going to have an exceptional worker on that floor who, through efficiency or insight, produces $30 of value per hour.
Okay, they figured out a shortcut, or they're just naturally faster?
Exactly. And you will also have a mediocre worker who just barely follows the manual and only produces $15 of value per hour.
Right, doing the bare minimum.
Because you are paying them both a flat rate of $20, the exceptional worker is effectively subsidizing the mediocre worker.
Oh, I see.
$5 of the exceptional worker's value is being siphoned off to cover the shortfall of the mediocre worker.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. It's like a hidden tax on talent.
It's an unsustainable tax.
Yeah.
Eventually, the exceptional worker realizes they are generating far more value than they are being compensated for.
They realize they're carrying the dead weight of the system.
So what do?
They leave.
Exactly. They go to a competitor that rewards their actual output, or they start their own enterprise.
Leaving the boss with a team consisting entirely of mediocre workers producing $15 of value for $20 of pay.
Right.
The math flips upside down.
The business model collapses.
Wow.
You cannot survive by subsidizing mediocrity.
No, you really can't.
Therefore, building a business or a career around being average is too expensive.
So the practical takeaway here is that you have to stop trying to be slightly better than average.
Yes.
If your entire strategy is just to be standard and reliable, you have entered that race to the bottom.
And you will eventually lose to someone faster or cheaper.
You have to compete on being unique and remarkable.
Absolutely.
But if I can't compete on being a standard, reliable worker, how do I break out of that trap?
Wow.
Because traditionally, the only people who could dictate terms were the people who owned the factories.
Right.
If I don't have millions of dollars to build a manufacturing plant, how do I compete?
That question cuts to the heart of one of the most profound economic shifts in human history.
Okay.
To understand how you break out, we have to look at how power has completely inverted.
Inverted how?
For centuries, there was a massive uncrossable gulf between management and labor.
Right. If we look at historical economic frameworks like the theories of Karl Marx or Adam Smith,
Yeah.
and we're just talking about these purely as historical context, of course.
Yes, of course.
Both of those thinkers saw the world as fundamentally divided into two distinct teams.
Yes, they did.
You had management, who held all the cards because they owned the heavy machinery, the raw materials, the capital.
And you had labor who merely showed up and followed instructions because they had no other way to generate income.
Right.
Management owned the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
Labor was entirely dependent on management for access to those means.
Exactly.
But the internet demolished that barrier to entry.
Demolished it.
The physical factory is no longer the sole engine of wealth creation.
Right.
Today, a $3,000 laptop with a broadband connection is an entire factory.
That is so true.
You don't need a massive bank loan to build a printing press to reach millions of people.
No, you just need a blogging platform or a podcast microphone.
Right.
This shift creates a whole new category of people.
It does.
It's no longer just management versus labor. We are seeing the emergence of a third layer.
The third layer, yes.
Individuals who straddle the line between capitalist and worker.
They are the linchpins.
Right. They are linchpins because they don't rely on external capital to generate value.
No, they leverage internal power.
Yeah.
Their insight, their creativity, their ability to synthesize information, and their capacity to connect people, that becomes the new means of production.
There are some incredible real-world examples of this from the text.
Let's hear them.
Take someone like Brian Clark, who made a fortune by launching a highly successful WordPress theme.
Right.
He didn't need a sprawling corporate campus or hundreds of employees to do that.
Well,
Or Perez Hilton, who built a media empire by writing a gossip blog from coffee shops.
exactly.
But my absolute favorite is Abby Ryan.
Oh, yeah, the painter.
Yes, she is an artist who makes nearly $100,000 a year by painting one tiny, beautiful oil painting every single day.
One a day.
And selling it directly to buyers on eBay.
What Clark and Hilton and Ryan all share is that they bypass the traditional gatekeepers entirely. They are acting as both the capitalist who owns the factory and the worker who produces the value.
Yeah. Abby Ryan didn't need to ask permission from an elite gallery owner to show her work.
She didn't.
She didn't need a wealthy patron to fund her art either.
No, she used the democratized tools of the internet to connect directly with an audience that valued her specific, unique output.
It is incredibly empowering. It fundamentally shifts the locus of control.
It really does.
The practical takeaway here is that you're no longer waiting for someone to pick you.
You can pick yourself.
You don't need a promotion to start leading.
Right.
You don't need a publisher to start writing. You already possess the means of production. It's sitting on the desk right in front of you.
Exactly. The only missing ingredient is your own initiative.
Wow.
But stepping into that power requires abandoning a deeply ingrained corporate habit,
What happened?
specifically regarding how we expect to be compensated.
Oh, okay.
When the workers own the means of production, the entire concept of the hourly wage begins to disintegrate.
Oh, this is such a critical point.
Yeah.
We have spent our entire adult lives and our school years before that being conditioned for attendance-based compensation.
Attendance-based compensation.
It's that deeply internalized mindset of, I was physically at my desk for 8 hours today. I didn't take an overly long lunch. Therefore, I deserve a paycheck.
Attendance-based compensation is the ultimate factory hangover.
A hangover, wow.
In the past, presence actually was a decent proxy for productivity.
Sure.
If your job was to unlock the doors of the retail store at 8 a.m. or sit in a chair monitoring the pressure dials at the power plant, your physical presence was the value.
Showing up was the job.
Yes. But we have reached the end of the era where you get paid simply for occupying space.
Because going back to our earlier point, if all you are doing is showing up and occupying a chair, a machine can occupy that space cheaper.
Or someone halfway across the world can log into that system digitally for a fraction of the cost.
Right. The market doesn't care about the time you spent. It only cares about the impact you created.
There is a brilliant observation from the cartoonist and writer Hugh MacLeod that perfectly captures the friction of this transition.
What does he say?
He notes that the web has made kicking ass easier to achieve and mediocrity harder to sustain.
I love that.
And then he delivers this incredible line, mediocrity now howls in protest.
Mediocrity now howls in protest. You can really see that everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
People are genuinely angry that the old deal is dead.
They are.
They are frustrated that loyalty and tenure aren't enough anymore. You hear it all the time, like, I've been here 10 years, why aren't I getting promoted?
They are howling because the internet acts as a massive, ruthless, unblinking filter.
Hmm.
It filters out the average, the standard, the adequate, and it aggressively elevates the remarkable.
Yeah.
In this environment, successful organizations are actively shedding the people who just show up,
Why?
and they are fiercely rewarding the people who actually make a tangible difference.
So practically speaking, you have to evaluate your worth entirely differently now.
You do.
You can't look at your timesheet to gauge your value.
No, you have to look at your day and ask, what unique difference did I make today?
Right. What problem did I solve that a manual couldn't have solved?
Exactly. Whose mind did I change?
If your only contribution today was your physical presence in a chair, you are completely expendable.
Which brings us to the ultimate question.
Okay.
If you can't be a reliable worker bee anymore, and you can't rely on attendance-based compensation, what exactly are you supposed to be?
All right. How do you organize your career in a way that generates real value?
Think of the economy as a massive staircase.
The staircase. Right.
At the very bottom, on the widest step, you have heavy lifting.
Like manual labor.
Right. Manual labor, rote tasks, basic data entry.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of people can do the heavy lifting, which means the supply of labor is high and the value is low.
Makes sense.
As you move up the stairs, the steps get narrower.
Okay.
Maybe the next step up is selling or managing the heavy lifters.
Right. Fewer people are really good at sales, so the value increases.
Exactly. But at the very top, on the smallest, highest step, you have the creators.
The inventors.
Almost no one puts in the hard work to create something entirely new.
And that top step is where all the economic value is migrating.
It is. The future belongs entirely to the creators.
So we need a specific term for these people.
Why? And the most accurate word is artists.
Okay, I have to stop you here because this is where I get tripped up.
Okay, why?
When I hear the word artist, I picture someone in a beret covered in oil paint, or someone sculpting clay, or maybe a musician.
Sure.
But what if I'm an accountant?
Okay.
What if I'm a supply chain manager?
Yeah.
I literally have to follow the rules, otherwise my company gets fined or I go to jail.
Right, right.
How can an accountant be an artist?
It requires completely redefining the word.
Okay.
Art in this economic context has absolutely nothing to do with paint or canvas.
So what is it?
Let's use the analogy of a cook versus a chef.
I like food.
A cook is someone who follows a recipe perfectly. They measure the flour they set the oven to the exact temperature requested.
Right.
That is highly skilled factory work.
Because they're just following a manual, essentially.
Exactly. A chef, on the other hand, is the person who invents the recipe in the first place. The chef understands the chemistry of flavor profiles and takes a risk to combine ingredients in a way that has never been done before to evoke a specific reaction from the diner.
Wow.
The future belongs to the chefs, not the cooks.
So how does the accountant become the chef?
An accountant who is a cook just takes the receipts, plugs them into the tax software, and generates the standard report.
They followed the recipe.
Right. An accountant who is an artist looks at the data, recognizes a hidden pattern in how the company is bleeding money, and designs a completely new financial dashboard that changes how the CEO understands the entire business.
Oh, wow.
The artist accountant brings human insight, connection, and a willingness to challenge the status quo to their work.
So it's about an interaction. It's doing something that changes the recipient, whether that recipient is a customer or a coworker or a boss.
Precisely. It connects to the concept of being a purple cow.
A purple cow.
Yeah. If you are driving down the highway and see a field of brown cows, you ignore them.
Right. They're just cows.
They are standard, they are a commodity, but if you see a purple cow, you stop the car.
Yeah, of course.
It is remarkable. It demands your attention. Just as a corporation has no right to demand a consumer's attention without offering a remarkable product, an employee has no right to demand a secure job just by existing and following the rules.
Right. You can't just be a brown cow and expect to be rewarded.
Exactly. To stand out, you have to exert what we call emotional labor.
Emotional labor.
Yeah.
Not physical labor of lifting boxes and not cognitive labor of just typing fast.
Right.
It's the bravery of doing something without a map.
It is the hard work of making a personal connection, of caring deeply about the outcome, of taking a risk to say, you know, this process is broken and I think I know how to fix it.
That is what an artist does, regardless of their job title.
Yes.
So the practical takeaway for the listener isn't to quit your corporate job and move to Paris to paint.
Please don't do that.
It is to find the art in whatever it is you are already doing.
Right.
Whether you are answering a frustrated customer service call or writing an internal email to your team or designing a complex financial spreadsheet, You can do it in a way that creates a genuine human connection.
You can do it in a way that surprises people and makes the system better.
That is the essence of becoming indispensable.
It is.
You become the linchpin, not because of the manual you memorized, but because of the humanity and initiative you bring to the room.
Exactly.
To pull all of these threads together, the ultimate realization is that the old social contract is permanently broken.
It's gone.
That deal where your obedience, your heads down hard work, and your willingness to be an average reliable cog guaranteed you a safe, secure life.
Yeah.
That deal is off the table forever.
And if we look closely, it's actually a massive opportunity that it is broken.
So?
We are no longer living in an industrial world of limited capital where we have to rely on factory owners to dictate our worth and our livelihood.
Right.
The true soul of this transition is that security today comes from doing the exact opposite of what the industrial machine taught us for a century.
Wow. We have to reclaim that inner 2-year-old on the airplane.
Bring Zeke back.
Yes. We have to dust off our innate childhood curiosity and start poking at the boundaries of our jobs.
Absolutely.
We have to look at our laptops, not just as typing machines, but as our own personal factories, capable of reaching the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, we have to be willing to do the brave, exhausting, emotional labor required to be an indispensable artist in whatever field we choose to operate in.
It is a profound shift from a mindset of compliance to a mindset of contribution.
But knowing that you need to ditch the factory mindset and become an artist is really only half the battle.
That's sure.
Actually figuring out if you have the specific abilities to make yourself indispensable, and more importantly, whether you can survive the intense internal and external emotional resistance of standing out and risking failure.
Yeah, the resistance.
That is exactly what we are going to explore next time.
It's going to be a fascinating deep dive into the psychology of why we instinctively hold ourselves back when we are so close to doing great work.
I cannot wait to get into that.
It'll be good.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a concrete challenge.
Okay.
As you go about your day today, think about the last time you blindly followed a rule or a procedure at work that you knew made absolutely no sense.
We've all done it.
You followed it just to fit in, just to check the box, just to avoid ruffling any feathers. Now ask yourself, what would have happened if you had broken that rule to actually make the end result better? So what if the very system that promised you success, school, following the rules, getting a good job, what if all of that was actually a multi-generational architectural blueprint carefully designed to make you completely average?
I mean, right off the bat, that sounds like the premise of some dystopian science fiction movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You hear a bold statement like that, and your immediate psychological defense mechanism just wants to reject it. We want to believe that the path we've walked, the path everyone walks, is just the natural order of things.
It's comfortable to think that way.
Exactly. But when you start to really pull at the threads of how modern work and how education were constructed over the last century or so, you realize you don't find a natural evolution at all. You find a very specific, heavily engineered system.
Right. And so in this deep dive, we are deconstructing the origins of that exact modern work culture. We're looking at the historical and psychological mechanisms of this industrial educational complex that essentially trained the genius right out of us.
Which is a heavy thing to realize.
It is. But for anyone listening right now, whether you're interested in business, entrepreneurship, or just taking actual control over your career trajectory, understanding this hidden programming is the crucial first step. It's how you break free from what we're going to call the factory mindset today.
Because you really cannot escape a cage until you recognize that you are in one. I mean, the most effective cages are the ones we just mistake for our natural habitat.
Yeah, invisible bars.
Exactly. We have this pervasive feeling that operating as a compliant, mediocre worker is somehow human nature. It just feels like our default state. But evolutionary biology tells a completely different story.
Okay, so let's pull on that biological thread for a second. Because when people say, well, it's just human nature to want to keep your head down, follow the leader, don't make waves, they're kind of conflating what is culturally familiar with what is actually biologically hardwired.
Precisely. If you look at the work of evolutionary biologists like Stephen Jay Gould, for example, you see a much, much broader picture of human potential.
What did he find?
Well, Gould pointed out that human beings possess a massive behavioral repertoire. So yes, violence and sexism and general nastiness, those are biological, but they only represent a subset of possible human behaviors.
Right.
because peacefulness, equality, kindness, and this wild, unconstrained creativity, those are just as biological. The traits that actually rise to the surface entirely depend on the social structures we build to cultivate them.
I see. So if you build a society that heavily rewards aggression, you end up with a population of aggressive people.
You do.
And if you engineer a society that exclusively rewards obedience, well, you get obedient people. It doesn't mean humans are inherently destined to be mindless cogs. We just adapt to the environment we're placed in.
And the environment we've been placed in for the last couple of centuries is, well, it's a total historical anomaly.
How so?
Think about it this way. For roughly 99% of human history, we were hunters, foragers, eventually agriculturalists. We survived through extreme adaptability, we took risks, we did constant real-time problem solving.
We had to, just to stay alive.
Right. To visualize this, I want you to imagine a stack of 400 quarters just sitting on a table.
Okay, 400 quarters. I'm picturing it.
Let's say each quarter represents 250 years of human culture. That entire stack signifies the roughly 100,000 years we've had organized human tribes.
Okay, so that's all of human history right there in the stack.
Yes. Now, if you take the top quarter off that stack, that single solitary coin represents how many years our society has revolved around factories, formal jobs, standardized schooling, and the corporate world as we know it today.
Wait, really? Just the top coin?
Just that one, the other 399 coins, those represent a vastly different view of commerce, economy, and human agency.
That visual is staggering.
Hmm.
I mean, 1/4 out of 400. And yet, that single coin at the very top of the stack has completely rewritten our cultural DNA.
It really has.
We've been conditioned to believe that accepting strict hierarchy and the lack of personal responsibility that comes with a traditional factory job is one true way to organize society. But let me clarify something here.
Go ahead.
Because when we use the word factory, the immediate image that jumps to mind is like a 1920s smokestack, right? Soot-covered windows, someone in heavy overalls pulling a massive steel lever on an assembly line.
Yeah, that is the legacy definition. But the architecture of the factory has evolved way beyond physical manufacturing. The factory is no longer just a place that makes cars or steel.
What is it now?
The factory is prudential insurance. It's the DMV. It is quite literally any organization where people go simply to do what they're told and collect a paycheck.
Okay, so the modern white-collar worker,
Yeah.
Sitting in a climate-controlled office, typing on a dual-monitor setup, drinking artisanal coffee, they're fundamentally a factory worker.
If their daily output is strictly planned, controlled, and measured to optimize for compliance and predictability, then absolutely yes. The core operating system is identical. I mean, if your job can be fully encapsulated in a comprehensive manual and you're actively discouraged from bringing your own humanity or initiative or artistry to the task you're working in a factory.
Even if you're wearing a suit.
Exactly. If the goal is for you to just follow the prescribed steps, you're a factory worker. You just happen to wear a white collar while doing it. The only grease you have to wash off your hands at the end of the day is the grease from the takeout food you ate at your desk.
That's a brilliant way to put it, because the tragedy there isn't the physical labor at all. It's the systemic suppression of human initiative.
Yes, that's the core issue.
It actually reminds me of domestication. If we look at those 399 quarters of human history where we were wild, innovative, surviving by our wits, that this final quarter, the factory system, essentially domesticate us.
That's an interesting analogy.
Because I'm thinking, are we like wolves that have been selectively bred over generations into pugs? Like we used to roam the plains, and now we just sit patiently waiting for our manager to fill the kibble bowl and tell us what a good boy we are for hitting our KPI.
I mean, domestication is a harsh word, but functionally, it's a very accurate parallel.
How so?
Well, domestication relies on breeding out unpredictability and breeding in compliance. In the wild, unpredictability and spontaneous adaptation are vital survival skills.
Right.
But in a factory setting, whether that's making microchips or processing insurance claims, unpredictability is a critical flaw. It's a defect in the system.
Because the system wants easily replaceable parts.
Exactly. The system desires a high percentage of easily replaceable labor. If I can easily replace most of my workers with someone off the street who can just read the exact same manual, I can pay them significantly less.
It's just simple economics for them.
Right. So to make workers easily replaceable, you have to relentlessly standardize the work. And to standardize the work, you have to, as you said, domesticate the worker to accept that standardization without rebellion.
Okay, let me challenge that premise for a second, though.
Sure.
Because if I'm running a hospital, or if I am the chief engineer for a commercial airline, I do not want a nurse or a pilot bringing their quote-unquote wild, unpredictable personal edge to a blood transfusion or a pre-flight checklist.
Nobody wants that.
Right, I want them following the manual to the letter. So where's the line between vital, life-saving organizational structure and a soul-crushing factory that just suppresses humanity?
That is the crucial distinction we have to make here. There is a massive difference between strict safety protocols designed to protect human life and arbitrary compliance protocols designed to protect management egos and maintain cheap labor.
Okay, can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah. So when a pilot follows a pre-flight checklist, they are utilizing standardized safety measures to ensure the aircraft is mechanically sound. That's necessary structure.
Makes sense.
But if an airline forces its flight attendants to read a robotic, unfeeling script to a grieving passenger who just missed a flight for a funeral, rather than empowering that attendant to use their own human empathy and judgment to solve the problem, that is the factory mindset.
Ah, I see. It's about the objective of the standardization. Is it serving a critical functional baseline, or is it just a mechanism of control to prevent employees from having to think?
Precisely. Let's look at a structural example to make this really clear. Think about McDonald's versus a large Goodwill distribution center.
Okay. Two very different places.
On the surface, yes. But structurally, McDonald's is quite deliberately set up as a highly optimized factory. The fry cook isn't asked to express their culinary artistry. They aren't experimenting with new potato varietals.
No, they're just waiting for the beep.
Exactly. Listen for the electronic beep, lift the basket. It is a highly efficient machine designed to produce a perfectly predictable commodity at scale all across the globe.
And the Goodwill Distribution Center.
It operates on the exact same principles. Even though the mission is noble, processing donated clothes to raise money for a good cause, the labor itself is a factory.
Interesting.
People there sort, tag, and ship based on a strict, rigid set of rules designed for maximum throughput. The defining characteristic of a factory isn't whether the end product is a hamburger or a charitable donation.
What is it then?
The defining characteristic is the absence of emotional labor. It's the absence of the worker having the freedom to navigate without a map.
So if the map is completely provided, and your only job is to follow the route precisely, without any deviation, it's a factory.
Yes.
Which brings us right into the lap of the listener. Think about your average Tuesday at work. Really audit your own daily routines. Where are you simply executing a script?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. Where are you suppressing your own judgment, your own intuition, or your creativity, simply because that's just how the process is documented? Because recognizing the invisible bars of the cage is the absolute first requirement for stepping out of it.
And once you begin that audit, you start to see the factory architecture everywhere, which inevitably leads to the question of genesis.
Right. How did we get here?
How did this happen? Who built this architecture, and why was it so universally adopted in the first place?
Well, this isn't just an accident of history. If we rewind to the dawn of the industrial era around the late 19th century, the early industrialists and capitalists were facing a massive macroeconomic crisis.
They had a huge problem on their hands.
They did. They had invented these incredible machines capable of unprecedented scale, but they had two major existential problems. First, they couldn't find enough compliant, cheap workers to operate the machines. And second, they were terrified of overproduction.
Meaning they were making more goods than the population actually wanted to buy.
Exactly. So to understand the labor problem, you have to put yourself in the mindset of an agrarian society transitioning to an industrial one. Before the Industrial Revolution, people generally worked according to the seasons and the sun.
They were farmers, artisans, tradespeople.
Yeah. They controlled their own pace. They owned the output of their labor. They didn't sell their time. They sold their crops or their crafts.
Which is a fundamentally different economic relationship. Transitioning a population from that model of independent autonomy to subservient, clock-punched factory work was incredibly difficult.
I can imagine.
It was a massive psychological and social upheaval. People deeply resented the rigid schedules, the repetitive physical toll, the loss of autonomy, and they resisted.
Oh, heavily.
There were massive labor movements, unionizations, and widespread, often violent strikes.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it. You're telling someone whose family has farmed for 5 generations to move to a crowded, polluted city, stand in one spot for 14 hours a day, and perform a single repetitive motion until their body just breaks down.
Right. All to enrich a factory owner they will never meet.
The pushback was inevitable.
And the early response from the industrialists to this pushback was just brute force. When workers struck, owners would hire armed militias. We see this vividly in historical events like the Homestead Strike of 1892.
With Andrew Carnegie.
Yes, Carnegie and his chairman, Henry Clay Frick, utilized armed Pinkerton guards, trainloads of strikebreakers, and eventually state militias to violently crush the union.
But using armed militias to force people to work is incredibly expensive, it's highly unpredictable, and it's terrible for public relations.
Yeah.
It's just a wildly inefficient way to run a business. And Carnegie, being a ruthless optimizer, realized this.
He absolutely did. Now, maintaining strict historical impartiality here, Carnegie and other architects of the industrial age came to a profound realization. Violent coercion was simply not a sustainable long-term strategy for labor management.
It doesn't scale.
Exactly. The answer to worker unrest, the sustainable way to ensure a steady supply of cheap, compliant labor, wasn't the Pinkertons, it was education.
Let's look at this objectively as an historical optimization problem. Carnegie didn't champion universal education because he wanted a nation of philosophers and independent thinkers who would challenge his monopoly.
No, not at all.
He championed education because a compliant, moderately literate workforce was vastly more profitable than a rebellious, illiterate one.
The historical record is quite clear on this perspective from the industrialists. Carnegie himself viewed education as the ultimate stabilizing force for the industrial economy. He wrote about how education was the, quote, true panacea for the ills of the body politic.
But we have to look at the specific type of education that was being funded and standardized. We're talking about the Prussian model of education, right?
Yes, the Prussian model.
The system of ringing bells, sitting in neat rows, moving methodically from station to station, strictly obeying the authority figure at the front of the room. I mean, it is literally a simulated factory floor for children.
It is a simulation, precisely. The curriculum wasn't designed to create polymaths. It was designed to impart just enough literacy to read a manual, just enough math to do basic inventory, and a massive, overwhelming dose of behavioral compliance.
Just enough to be useful, not enough to question things.
Right, because the economic model required workers who would be productive, but crucially, who would be willing to work for less than the total value their productivity created.
Because that gap is profit.
Exactly, and to maximize that gap, you need workers who accept their position in the hierarchy without question.
So the industrialists essentially lobbied for and helped build a state-sponsored educational complex to mass-produce their ideal worker. Okay, so that solves the labor problem.
It does.
But what about the second problem? Overproduction. Because if your massive new factories are churning out tens of thousands of shirts or shoes or household goods every single day, you need a society that actually wants to buy them.
And this is fascinating because in the 1890s, that society did not exist. The consumer mindset had to be entirely invented.
Wait, really? People didn't just inherently want stuff.
No. If you look at demographic data from that era, the typical teenager or young adult owned very few items of clothing. Usually it was just a work outfit and a Sunday outfit.
Yeah.
They consumed virtually no commercial media. They owned no cosmetics. The concept of buying things for recreation or just social status was largely restricted to the extreme upper class.
So the typical household lived a very functional, utilitarian existence. They didn't have a biological drive to own 3 different variations of the same sneaker or to replace perfectly good furniture just because the stylistic trends changed.
Exactly. The industrialists had solved the supply side of the economic equation through mechanization, but demand was stagnant. They needed a mechanism to dramatically increase per capita consumption.
And this is where the early pioneers of public relations and advertising people like Edward Bernays entered the picture, right?
Yes, Bernays was a major figure here.
They realized you couldn't just sell the functional utility of product anymore. You had to link the product to emotional needs and social status. You had to manufacture desire.
Manufactured desire is the perfect term for it.
Keeping up with the Joneses is not an evolutionary trait from the Pleistocene epoch. It is a highly effective, recently engineered psychological pressure campaign.
And universal public education provided the perfect localized network to amplify that pressure campaign.
Oh, of course.
When you mandate that millions of children gather together in highly structured, densely packed social environments for 8 hours a day, you create the absolute ultimate petri dish for consumer culture.
It's brilliant in a dark, cynical kind of way. You want to make sure everyone feels the intense social pressure to own the newest manufactured good. Just put them all in a room together and let the natural human desire for peer acceptance do the heavy lifting.
That's all it takes.
The school system didn't just train people to follow the bell schedule for the assembly line. It served as a concentrated hub where consumer desires could spread exponentially.
It became a closed-loop macroeconomic system.
How so?
Well, the school produces the compliant worker necessary to operate the machine. That same school environment cultivates the intense social anxieties that produce the eager consumer. The worker earns their wage and immediately feeds it back into the system to buy the output of the machine, largely to soothe the social anxieties the system created in the first place.
So, and here's the joke sign from Maplemere Public School that perfectly summarizes this.
Oh, yes, read that.
The imaginary sign out front says, "We train the factory workers of tomorrow. Our graduates are very good at following instructions, and we teach the power of consumption as an aid for social approval."
It's funny, but it's terrifyingly accurate.
It really is. So if you are listening to this on your commute or looking at your bank statement, ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Look at your most recent discretionary purchases. Look at your behavior in your last team meeting at work.
Audit yourself.
Yeah. Are you keeping your head down, avoiding conflict, and buying that new gadget because it genuinely serves your deeply held personal goals? Or are you operating perfectly within the parameters of a century-old cultural programming designed to make you a quiet worker and a loud consumer?
Separating our authentic desires from the desires that have been systematically installed in us requires a tremendous amount of critical self-reflection. And it's difficult because the conditioning starts so early.
It really does.
And it specifically targets our natural ambitions.
So let's dig into that conditioning. Because the psychological mechanism of how we are molded into this factory-acceptable shape is absolutely fascinating. Let's talk about the conditioning of what we might call the mediocre man.
The mediocre man.
When you observe young children, 4, 5, 6 years old, they do not possess an innate desire to be average. They believe they can do absolutely anything. They want to be astronauts. They want to build skyscrapers. They genuinely believe they can learn to fly.
The ambition is completely boundless. No child sets out with the deliberate goal of becoming a typical, unremarkable middle manager who carefully avoids taking risks.
Definitely not.
Yet, as the indoctrination of the educational and corporate systems kicks in year after year of standardized testing, grading against a curve, and constant social reinforcement, a profound psychological shift occurs. We stop looking for ways to stand out, and we start looking for places to hide.
We seek out a sinecure.
Yeah.
We want a job title that acts as a shield, right? A steady paycheck that smooths out the chaotic bumps of the real world, and a system that will protect us from ever being fully exposed.
We deeply internalize the belief that remarkable output, true innovation, and art are the exclusive domains of someone else.
The geniuses, the prodigies, the chosen few.
Right. We learn to constrain ourselves to a very tiny range of motion. We restrict our physical and intellectual movements to the narrow parameters that have been deemed safe by the organization.
And there is a brilliant story that perfectly illustrates this auditory and psychological phenomenon. It involves the conductor and author Roger Nierenberg.
Oh, this is a great example.
He runs these incredible leadership sessions where he uses a live symphony orchestra as a real-time model for organizational dynamics. Can you break down what he did?
Yeah, so the Nuremberg Orchestra experiment is one of the clearest demonstrations of how deeply ingrained this conditioning is. During a session, Nuremberg asked the orchestra to perform a specific piece of music twice.
Okay, twice.
For the first pass, he gave them a very specific instruction. Play as perfectly synchronized as humanly possible. He wanted every musician perfectly matching the person next to them, blending their individual instruments into a single, uniform, flawless sound.
These are world-class musicians, so they executed it flawlessly. It was technically perfect. Then he asked them to play it a second time. The instruction changes.
For the second pass, he instructed each individual musician to go to their own personal edge. He asked them to engage with the sheet music exactly the way they wanted to interpret it, prioritizing their own emotional expression and artistry over perfectly blending in with the group.
Now, you would logically expect the second version to sound like an absolute train wreck. I mean, if you have 50 musicians all deciding to go rogue and play it their own way, it should be chaotic noise.
That's what you would assume.
But here is the massive revelation. To the untrained ears of the business executives sitting in the room listening, the two versions were almost impossible to tell apart.
And that is the crux of the illusion right there. The audience could barely distinguish between the perfectly synchronized factory version and the highly individualized artistic version. But for the musicians themselves, the experience was night and day.
Really? How so?
The energy, the engagement, the emotional labor required for the second version was infinitely higher. They were alive.
So why do organizations, whether it's a symphony or a software company, demand the first version? Why are managers so obsessed with synchronization if the end result sounds essentially the same to the customer?
Because the entire architecture of the factory system relies on absolute predictability. Organizations fear the highs just as much as they fear the lows.
That's counterintuitive. Why fear the highs?
The logic of the assembly line is that we must strictly limit the lows. We cannot afford terrible, catastrophic mistakes. But by strictly limiting the lows through rigid standardization, we inherently cap the highs as well. The system trades the possibility of transcendent brilliance for the guarantee of mediocre reliability.
But hold on, let's look at this from the perspective of a CEO or a project manager trying to actually ship a product.
Okay.
How do you actually align a massive group of people if everyone is out there playing at their edge? Doesn't that just invite a level of operational chaos that could bankrupt a company? I mean, if the marketing department, the engineering department, and sales are all just expressing their personal artistry, how does anything actually integrate and function?
It's a very common fear, but it fundamentally misunderstands what the personal edge actually is. What Nuremberg demonstrated wasn't chaos. The musicians were still playing the exact same sheet music.
Oh, right.
They were in the same key, following the same fundamental tempo. The structural alignment was absolutely still there. The difference was the emotional labor they brought to the execution of their specific part.
Ah, so the difference between merely executing the notes mechanically and interpreting the notes with human empathy and insight.
Exactly. Chaos is deciding to play a completely different song. Artistry is playing the agreed-upon song, but bringing your full humanity to it.
I love that distinction.
In most corporate settings today, what passes for creativity is incredibly superficial. It's just the illusion of agency within a tightly controlled box. It's a software developer being allowed to choose whether the submit button is a slightly lighter or darker shade of blue that is still operating within a tiny range of motion.
True innovation requires challenging the fundamental assumptions of the work. But we don't do that because we've been systematically punished for stepping out of line since we were in kindergarten.
We've been trained not to.
Right. If you tell a fast food worker, hey, I want you to truly delight the next customer, they usually just freeze. They don't know what to do. So they might just repeat the exact same corporate script, but say it slightly louder or with a forced smile. They literally cannot visualize stepping outside the manual.
Because stepping outside the manual introduces the risk of failure, it introduces the risk of standing out and the risk of being held personally responsible. We retreat to the safety of the manual because the manual offers deniability.
Deniability, that's a powerful word there.
It is. If you follow the rules perfectly and the project still fails, you can blame the rules. Hey, I just followed the process. But if you go to your personal edge and fail, you have to own it.
So for you listening, think about the project sitting on your desk right now. Find one specific area, one task, where you know deep down you are operating in a tiny range of motion. You are phoning it in, doing exactly what the historical precedent of your company dictates, and nothing more.
Just coasting.
Yeah, coasting. Tomorrow, deliberately push to your personal edge in that one specific task. Don't ask for permission. Don't wait for a memo authorizing you to be creative. Just inject a burst of your own unique insight into it and see what happens. It's a low-stakes way to begin exercising a muscle that has completely atrophied.
And it has atrophied for a very specific reason. We have to examine the primary tool used to enforce this tiny range of motion. We have to look at the neuroscience of how we were taught, and specifically the use of fear as a pedagogical instrument.
This is where the history of education gets deeply uncomfortable. Let's look at the psychology of memory. From a purely neurological standpoint, human beings remember things learned in fear with terrifying clarity.
It's hardwired into us.
It is an evolutionary survival mechanism, hardwired into our amygdala. If you touch a hot stove and burn your finger, the pain and fear ensure you never forget that lesson. If a soldier survives a battlefield, those tactical lessons are seared into their consciousness forever.
It is the absolute most potent, visceral form of learning we possess, and the architects of the mass education system understood this either intuitively or explicitly.
How so?
Well, when your goal is to successfully process tens of millions of diverse students a year through a highly standardized curriculum, you need a highly effective, infinitely scalable shortcut. You just don't have the time or resources for individualized mentorship. Fear is the ultimate shortcut to enforcing compliance at scale.
So the modern classroom, in many ways, was constructed as a low-grade, constant-pressure psychological battlefield. It's not the fear of physical violence, mostly, but a pervasive systemic anxiety.
It's the fear of the red ink,
Oh, yeah.
the fear of the D minus, the fear of disappointing the authority figure at the front of the room, the intense social fear of not fitting in with the peer group, the overarching existential fear that if you don't follow these specific arbitrary steps, you will be permanently locked out of a successful life.
It is decades of continuous layered anxiety drilling a very specific set of behaviors right into our central nervous system.
And what are those behaviors? What does this massive fear-based apparatus actually train us to do for 12 to 16 years?
When you look at the actual checklist of what constitutes a quote-unquote good student, it is a damning indictment of the system's true priorities.
The list is striking in its utter disconnect from high-level cognitive skills.
Yeah, let's go through it. To be successful in this system, you must master the art of fitting in. You must follow instructions without requiring the rationale behind them. You must use the mandated number 2 pencils.
You must take copious, compliant notes.
You must show up on time every single day, regardless of your physical or mental state. You must learn the specific skill of cramming short-term information to pass a test, and then efficiently forgetting that information to make room for the next test.
Have legible handwriting.
Right, buy the exact same clothes and social markers the other kids are buying. Do not ask disruptive questions that slow down the pacing guide. Do the absolute minimum amount required in each subject so you have enough bandwidth to survive the other subjects.
And avoid failure at all costs, because failure is a permanent stain on your permanent record.
It is, as you said earlier, a masterclass in mediocrity. And we have to look at the explicit historical intent behind this sorting mechanism. There is a deeply revealing quote from Woodrow Wilson, reflecting on the goals of public education in the early 20th century.
This quote is very illuminating.
Viewing this strictly as an historical artifact of the era's macroeconomic mindset, Wilson stated, "We want one class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class, of necessity in every society, to forego the privileges of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks."
He just said the quiet part out loud, didn't he?
He really did. There's no conspiracy to uncover when the President of the United States openly acknowledges that the explicit goal of the system is to divide the population. Give a tiny fraction, a real, expansive education to become the managers and owners, and train the vast, overwhelming majority to simply be compliant manual laborers.
And again, maintaining strict impartiality, that is just the sobering structural reality we have to confront about that era. The educational system isn't broken. That's a fundamental misunderstanding people have.
It's not broken.
No, the system is functioning perfectly. It's operating at maximum efficiency according to its original design parameters. It grades, it sorts, and it reliably mass-produces obedient labor.
The problem is that the economic realities of the world today have completely decoupled from the output of that system. What we are measuring in schools, what we call being good at school, is entirely disconnected from what actually generates value in the modern economy. I love the analogy that being good at school is exactly like being good at Frisbee.
It's a very apt comparison.
Think about it. Being good at Frisbee is a neat trick. It takes practice. It's impressive if you can throw 165 grams of round plastic 100 yards with pinpoint accuracy.
Very impressive.
But unless your actual job title is Professional Ultimate Frisbee Player, who cares? Nobody in the real world pays you to throw a piece of plastic, and nobody in the modern economy pays you to sit silently in a room and fill in bubbles on a multiple-choice test.
Well, if your chosen career path closely mirrors the structure of a classroom, if your job involves receiving highly structured homework assignments, searching through provided manuals for answers that are already known to your supervisors, complying strictly with top-down instructions, and regurgitating facts under time pressure, then yes, being good at school is excellent preparation.
But those jobs are being eradicated at breakneck speed. And this is where we need to talk about the mechanical Turk. For those who aren't familiar, let's break down what that means, because it is the ultimate existential threat to the good student.
The term originates from an 18th century illusion. The original mechanical Turk was a fake chess-playing machine. It looked like a complex automaton, but it actually had a human chess master hidden inside the cabinet moving the pieces.
Oh, wow.
It was an illusion of automation driven by cheap human labor. Today, Amazon operates a web service explicitly named Amazon Mechanical Turk.
Right, and the modern Amazon Mechanical Turk is an API, a software interface that allows companies to crowdsource microtasks to hundreds of thousands of human workers around the globe for pennies.
Exactly.
If a computer can't quite identify an image or transcribe a messy audio snippet, the system routes it to a human Turker who does the rote task for a few cents and sends it back.
And the profound implication of the modern Mechanical Turk is this. If your job consists of clearly defined, rote, step-by-step cognitive tasks that require no unique insight or emotional labor, your job can and will be digitized, outsourced to the lowest global bidder, or entirely automated by artificial intelligence.
It's just a matter of time.
You are competing on a global market where the primary metric is who will do the compliant work the cheapest, and you cannot win a race to the bottom.
This perfectly explains a phenomenon that so many people witness today. We see these incredibly high achievers, the straight-A students, the valedictorians, the people who mastered the game of school, suddenly hit a massive wall in their mid-20s.
It happens all the time.
They get out into the chaotic real world, and they freeze. They are sitting at their desks, paralyzed, waiting for a syllabus that just doesn't exist.
They're waiting for the manager to hand them a grading rubric so they know exactly what steps to take to get an A. But the modern economy doesn't reward the ability to perfectly execute a provided map. A machine can execute a map perfectly.
A machine is cheaper, too.
Much cheaper. The modern economy rewards initiative, strategic risk-taking, complex problem-solving, and the ability to navigate through dense fog when no map exists at all.
So the mental shift you have to make right now listening to this is to actively deprogram your inner straight-A student. Stop waiting for the boss to give you a number 2 pencil test. In the real world, the most valuable work isn't solving the problem someone else handed you. The highest value is found in defining the problem yourself.
Which logically leads us to the ultimate question regarding education.
Let's hear it.
If the current curriculum of compliance, rote memorization, and fear-based testing is fundamentally obsolete for the future economy, what should our educational institutions actually be teaching? When you strip away the bureaucratic legacy, the research, and the economic data point to just 2 essential skills that truly matter.
Only 2. After 12 years of mandatory schooling, it boils down to 2 things. Let's unpack them. Skill number 1, solve interesting problems. Skill number 2, lead. Let's start with the first one. Why the specific emphasis on the word interesting? What makes a problem interesting versus uninteresting?
An uninteresting problem is one where the answer is a known, easily retrievable fact. For over a century, schools have obsessed over domain knowledge. They force students to memorize the dates of the War of 1812, the capital of North Dakota, or the periodic table.
Right.
That was incredibly valuable in 1950, when access to information was scarce and physically locked in encyclopedias. You had to hold the facts in your brain to be useful.
But today, we live in an always-on Wikipedia world. Domain knowledge, just possessing raw facts, has become a universally cheap commodity.
Exactly. The internet knows infinitely more than you do. It never forgets, and it can retrieve the data in milliseconds. We spend years training students to be what we might call trigonometricians, teaching them to manually calculate the hypotenuse of right triangles through rote repetition. But a 50-cent microchip can perform that calculation flawlessly and instantly.
If I need a fact, I ask my phone. I am not going to hire a human being whose only value proposition is that they memorize the encyclopedia. That is an uninteresting problem.
The economic value has permanently shifted away from possessing domain knowledge and moved entirely toward possessing diagnostic skills and nuanced insight. An interesting problem is one for which a search engine is completely useless. The ultimate ungoogleable question is, what should I do next?
What should I do next? Man, that question is the terrifying abyss of freedom, because a machine can optimize a supply chain, but a machine cannot tell you what entirely new product your company should invent next year. A machine cannot look at a demoralized, exhausted team of engineers and know how to inspire them. A machine cannot sit across from an irate, betrayed client and deploy the necessary emotional empathy to salvage the relationship. Those are deeply interesting problems.
And solving those complex, human-centric, interesting problems requires the deployment of the second essential skill, leadership.
Now, this is where a lot of people push back mentally. Because culturally, we treat leadership like it's genetic. We act as if you are either born a charismatic, 6-foot-tall general who commands the room effortlessly, or you are genetically destined to be a foot soldier.
But the historical and psychological data strongly refutes that biological determinism. Leadership is not a genetic gift. It is a discrete, definable skill. It is a set of behaviors that can be analyzed, practiced, and mastered over time. Schools could teach leadership just as effectively as they figured out how to teach mass compliance.
They could teach us how to read group dynamics, how to be socially intelligent, how to communicate vision, how to build consensus, how to navigate failure without collapsing. But they systematically avoid teaching these things. Why?
Because an industrial factory doesn't need 1,000 independent leaders. It needs 1,000 compliant followers and exactly one manager to tell them what to do. The tragedy of the modern educational system is that it is structurally organized to stamp out the very greatness and initiative we claim our economy desperately needs.
And you see this in the plot of truly great teachers. The teachers who actually want to create independent thinkers, who want to teach their students to solve interesting problems. The system often treats them like an infection.
The bureaucratic system inherently favors the bureaucrat teacher over the artist teacher, fostering true innovation, encouraging off-the-chart insights, and guiding students to find their personal edge is messy. It's time-consuming and deeply unpredictable.
It doesn't look neat on paper.
Right. It does not scale cleanly across a spreadsheet. But standardized testing, drill and kill worksheets, and fear-based compliance, that scales beautifully. The system punishes the artist teacher with rigid pacing guides and bureaucratic busywork because the architecture of the system demands predictable, measurable outputs above all else.
It is incredibly frustrating to look at the massive squandering of human potential. But let's bring this back to the adult listener, because we cannot invent a time machine, go back to the 3rd grade, and rewrite our educational history.
We can't.
If an adult listening right now realizes they missed out on learning how to solve interesting problems and lead because they spent 15 years memorizing state capitals and trying not to get a C-, how do they retroactively train themselves in these skills?
You begin by shifting your mental framework. You must treat leadership and complex problem solving as muscles that must be stressed in order to grow, rather than fixed traits that you simply lack. And you start building that muscle with very small, deliberate repetitions.
So tomorrow morning, when you walk into the office or log on to your remote server, find a momentarily interesting problem, not a massive company-ending crisis that requires board approval. Find a small inefficiency, a frustrating communication bottleneck, or a broken process that everyone just accepts as the way it is.
Just a small thing.
Gather 2 or 3 colleagues and practice leading them to a solution. Do not ask your boss for a map. Do not ask for a set of instructions. Just step into the void and say, this process is broken and I think we can fix it. Let's try this.
That single act of unpermissioned problem solving is the fundamental core of leadership. It is the practical application of realizing that the map is an illusion and that the true value in the modern world lies in charting the course yourself.
We have excavated a massive amount of historical and psychological architecture today. We've peeled back a century of conditioning to look at the wires underneath.
If we bring all these historical threads, economic motives, and psychological mechanisms into a single unified thesis, the core realization is profound. Your averageness is an illusion. You are not naturally mediocre.
Not at all.
You and everyone listening are the end products of a highly effective, comprehensively engineered indoctrination program designed to turn wild human genius into predictable, cheap factory labor. We've traced the myth of natural obedience, exposing how the factory mindset completely infiltrated the modern white-collar world.
We've unpacked the macroeconomic motives of the 1890s industrialists who engineered a system to mass-produce compliant workers and perpetually anxious consumers.
We analyzed the neuroscience of how fear is weaponized in classrooms to enforce a tiny range of motion. And finally, we identified the only 2 skills that offer an escape velocity: solving interesting problems and leading without a map.
It is a heavy, almost disorienting realization to recognize the hidden factory operating in our daily routines, to understand the economics that built our schools, and to dissect the lingering anxieties that dictate our professional choices. But ultimately, understanding this history is incredibly empowering.
It is.
Because once you can clearly see the strings of the system, you possess the agency to refuse to be the puppet. The old take care of you bargain. The societal promise that if you just keep your head down, suppress your humanity, and follow the rules, the giant corporate machine will safely protect you until retirement. That bargain is dead. The system can no longer protect you.
The era of trading obedience for security is definitively over. The new economic reality demands that we offer our art, our emotional empathy, and our unpermissioned leadership in exchange for our place in the world. It demands that we stop functioning as replaceable cogs and start operating as indispensable human beings, which leaves us with a vital, deeply personal question to consider as we navigate our lives.
What's that?
If your entire formal education, your baseline consumption habits, your deepest professional anxieties, and your fears of failure were all carefully, systematically installed by an old architecture to make you a predictable, easily controlled asset. What happens to your career, your life, and the systems around you the very moment you choose to become unpredictable?
That is the ultimate frontier. The moment you step off the invisible assembly line, the moment you decide that your value isn't measured by your compliance to a manual, but by the complex, unmappable humanity you bring to the room. Now that we understand the architecture of the trap, the real work begins. Next time on the deep dive, we will explore the specific, actionable mindset shifts required to permanently break out of this historical mold and become truly indispensable. Keep questioning the defaults, keep exploring your personal edge, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.